The chill that coiled around Winterfell's battlements in the pre-dawn hour tasted of wood smoke and snow, sharp in Robb Stark's lungs as he paced the length of the stone walk above the godswood. Somewhere below, gray light seeped across the yard, silvering the broken ice in the training yard's troughs. Summer's early stirrings should have brought gentler mornings, yet the north clung to its frost as though defying the seven kingdoms that called it a rebellion. Robb stopped at the crenelle, fingers curling around rough granite dusted white. He had not slept. Sleep invited dreams of banners burning red across the green fork, of his father's head bowing beneath a Lannister sword. To stay awake was to remain king in the north, and kings could not afford dreams. Behind him, footsteps. Catelyn's stride was unhurried, but the clack of her boots echoed like distant drums. She set a fur-lined cloak around her son's shoulders. If the gods mean to answer, they will not judge you for trembling. Her voice, worn yet unbroken, floated into the morning stillness. I'm not praying, Robb replied, gaze fixed eastward beyond the wall of the world. I'm thinking of a stranger who might become our only friend. A stranger across an ocean. Catelyn's brow creased. One spoken of in sailors' tales and merchant rumors. Who breeds dragons in the desert? Robb turned. If one tale in 100 is true, Daenerys Targaryen commands fire. We need fire, Mother. The Lannisters choke us with gold. The South starves us of steel. A dragon queen might burn our fetters away. Catelyn's silence stretched, whipping in the breeze like a banner without sigil. At last she sighed. Even were she inclined. Ships run aground before Lannisport blockades Donatides. Our letters could drown with the Raven midway across the narrow sea. Then we send a man who cannot be bought or bent. Robb's eyes hardened. A man who owes us nothing and thus everything, for if we fall, all Westeros will sink in Lannister crimson. We ask him to carry truth to a woman hungry for it. In the castle's great hall, Maester Luwin watched the candlelight quiver on parchment. Robb's instructions were brief. Recount the treachery of King's Landing. Swear in blood the North's freedom. Promise allegiance in exchange for alliance. Yet words alone could not convince a dragon to fly west. So Maester Luwin had ground half his lifetime of secrets into the wax seal. Names of men and women lost to the Mad King's pyres. Confirmations that Stark banners had never ridden against House Targaryen in Robert Baratheon's rebellion. Let Daenerys see that history had made the Starks reluctant foes and natural friends of the dispossessed. The envoy would be Galbart Glover. Gaunt and grief-cut by the Ironborn, but known for honor beyond reproach. He rode at dawn with two companions, Mage Mormont, whose blunt tongue might impress a Khaleesi, raised among horse lords, and Sir Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, whose seasoned eyes missed nothing. They bore no heraldry save gray direwolf pins, a reminder that the North remembered, and remembered fiercely. Weeks fled. Storms broke against the shivering sea. Sailors swore they sighted leviathans beneath curling jade waves. Beyond Pentos, the summer sea gleamed like stood copper under the sun. The Swiftspear, their hired cog, crawled past Valyrian ruins and into Slaver's Bay. Each night Glover traced calloused fingers over Robb's letter, committing every line to memory, as though fear of dragons might burn the parchment mid-voyage. In Qarth, the city of splendor and dust, Daenerys Targaryen stood atop the tower of the Undying's shattered steps, gazing toward the docks where her red-sailed cog, the Balerion, floated, guarded by Unsullied. The dragonlings, Drogon, Rhaegal, Viserion, coiled about her shoulders in a living cape of heat. Qarth had feasted her, whispered exotic offers, and ultimately made of her a curiosity to cage. She had broken that cage with blood and wildfire, but Qarth's perfumed treachery lingered like incense in her hair. Jorah Mormont approached, helm beneath his arm. Khaleesi, the sails to the west carry wolf sheds. A northern house? Daenerys brushed sweat-slick silver hair from her brow. In Essos. Stark. Jorah muttered, a ghost of shame behind the name. His bear-claw sigil had once stood beneath Robb's banners. My kin's liege. Her violet eyes fixed on him, weighing the ache that hovered in his voice. Do you trust them? I trust their need, he answered. Starks do not cross seas lightly. If they've come, it is because their winter has grown desperate. Daenerys descended, bare feet padding over sun-warmed marble. Then let them speak. If Robb Stark is a wolf alone in a field of lions, I might find kinship with such a creature. The meeting took place at twilight inside an old Qartheen silk market, now emptied save for rows of arched colonnades strung with lanterns. Shadows danced across bronze-veined pillars. Galbart Glover stepped forward first, bowing but not kneeling. Meg Mormont's lips twitched at the sight of the exiled Lord Captain of Bear Island, standing protectively behind Daenerys. As though years and seas had not dissolved old loyalties, Sir Brynden Tully stayed at the rear, water-clear eyes scouting exits. Drogon hissed atop a stone plinth. Glover's pulse hammered, but he forced iron calm. "Your Grace," he began, voice rough with salt. "I come on behalf of Robb Stark, King in the North." He extends his hand across water and blood. Daenerys motioned him nearer. The lanthorn's glow printed tiger stripes across her cheeks. "Why should a dragon take a wolf's hand?" "Because our enemies are lions, my queen." Glover laid the parchment at her feet. "Lions that slew your kin and mine. Alone, a wolf cannot breach their golden den. Nor can a dragon claim a broken realm and hope to rule its ashes. But wolf and dragon together could birth a realm reborn." She finished, fingers sliding beneath Drogon's jaw to soothe his snarl. "Tell me of your king." Glover spoke of Ned Stark's honor, of the false confession forced before his beheading, of Sansa, a hostage at court, Arya vanished, Rickon and Bran hidden, of Catelyn's grief and Robb's rise. He spared no cruelty. Each word rang with winter's clean truth, absent the sweetening that Southerners favored. Daenerys, who had tasted cruelty's steel beneath Viserys' hand and the red waste's sun, recognized its timbre and believed him. "Your queen mother." Daenerys paused, uncertain how one addressed king's mothers in Westeros. "Lady Catelyn. She killed prisoners in her grief." "Ma'am?" Glover's throat tightened. "One king's son, in hopes of freeing her girls." "Desperation drives a mother to folly. Desperation drives kingdoms," Daenerys said softly. "And mothers." Rhaegal's talons pricked her collarbone, urging. Daenerys inhaled the dragon's sulfur-warm breath, balancing the cruelty she had heard against the cruelty she carried. "If Robb Stark would have my friendship, he must offer more than shared foes. A kingdom is not won on vengeance alone." Glover unrolled a smaller scroll. "Our maester traced your line with ours. Stark swords never rose against Princess Rhaenys and Prince Aegon at the Trident. Only Baratheon and Aeron. When Robert's wolves marched south, we marched north, holding Winterfell against Ironborn raids to shield the realm's innocence." He tapped the parchment. "We are no regicides." Daenerys' brows arched. Memory flickered. The night Jorah told her of Rhaegar's strewn armor, of Elias' shattered bones. The Starks had stayed north, yet guilt gnawed at their hearts. It was the stain of standing aside while madness consumed thrones. Sir Brynden stepped forward. "There is more, your grace. The realm rots. The Lannisters plan to wed their boy king to the Reach, crushing the Riverlands. Stannis batters at Dragonstone, claiming justice. The Tyrells sow flowers watered with blood. If you cross alone, every hand will rise against you, for fear you mean to scourge them. But if you arrive embraced by the North, you arrive as choice, not threat. Two free kingdoms allied in purpose." Mes. It was a shrewd argument, one Barristan Selmy would admire. It spared Westeros another conqueror's terror, while promising the downtrodden reprieve. Yet Daenerys had learned that promises turn to ash without loyalty. "What binds a Stark's promise?" she asked. Mage Mormont slammed the butt of her spear into stone. "The North remembers." Her voice thundered. "Oaths carved into heart trees and carried in bone. Betray a Stark, you wake to winter in your bed." Daenerys smiled. Small and sudden. "Very well. I will consider your alliance if your king honors mine. I seek not kneeling nor chains. I seek partners sworn to build a realm that will not burn its children." Tell Robb Stark, I shall sail when my dragons are grown enough to cross storms. Thine sea. Glover hesitated, blood draining. That may be years. The Lannisters press now. She touched Drogon's wing. Dragons grow quick when fed on tyranny. Then she nodded to Jorah. Provide them quarter. Let them witness how we feed ours. Days dripped into nights. In the garden courtyards of Zarodig-Shon Daxos, deserted manse, unsullied speared goats, and brought them to a walled pit. There Daenerys trained her hatchlings, voice ringing Valyrian syllables that called fire forth, until stars overhead dimmed in their glow. Meg Mormont watched, awed yet appraising, and quietly judged the Khaleesi's courage fit for Bear Island's ledgers. In return, the Mormonts swore by salt and snow to deliver the North's fealty. Glover penned letters each dusk, instructing ravens to Pentos, then Myr, then Lys, seeking shipwrights who dared build hulls for beasts of flame. Sir Brynden haunted the alleys, gathering whispers of Braavosi sell sails, who would trade coin for cause. They reported back to Daenerys, who weighed risk like gems upon a jeweler's scale. One midnight, as braziers guttered low, Daenerys dismissed her handmaidens and stepped into the courtyard's lingering heat. There she found Glover staring skyward. Flickers of red fire wove across the constellations. The dragons soared, silhouettes of living comets. I have seen the aurora in Eastwatch's black winter, he murmured. Yet never this. She stood beside him. They are children, Lord Glover. Children that carry history's fear on their wings. Will your king embrace such fear? And she. He will, Glover said. If those wings shelter the innocent. Daenerys' voice turned brittle. Can wolves and dragons truly shelter them? Or do we merely teach them to fear different teeth? Glover turned, surprised by the vulnerability in her words. My lady, I watched Robb Stark spare the lives of enemy lads who barely carried swords. He bears a wolf's ferocity, yes, but also a healer's mercy. If you two stand shoulder to shoulder, perhaps mercy will hold the spear steady. Then Darau. She did not answer, but her eyes, violet deepening to shadow, searched the pit where Drogon slept curled about Viserion, embers dimming between narrow vents. She whispered something in Valyrian. The night swallowed the syllables. Across the sea, Winterfell swam with preparations. Blacksmiths stoked night-long furnaces, forging chains not for shackling, but for anchoring masts thicker than any galleons. Maester Luwine corresponded with the Iron Bank of Braavos, leveraging the Stark name and rumored dragonfire to secure loans. Riverlords set sharpened poles along the neck to guard against Lannister thrusts. Each measure of defense was also promise, to hold until dragons arrived. Yet the longer war waited, the more the North's veins bled coin and men. Catelyn sat alone in the solar one gray morning, tracing stitches across an unfinished banner. A direwolf entwined with a dragon's silhouette, worked in silvers and scarlets. Her needle trembled. She had believed once in the safety of marriage alliances, in duty as the mortar that held realms. Now, her hope rested upon creatures out of old wives' tales, and a girl half a world away. The weight of that uncertainty pressed upon her chest like grief reborn. Still, stitch by stitch, she worked the cloth, binding wolf to dragon, as though the gods watched every loop. From White Harbor, Lord Wyman Manderley poured fortunes into shipyards, fashioning swift caravel keels that would slide beneath Targaryen banners. He hosted mummers' feasts where songs of the Dragon Queen rose among savory pies, publicly praising a just queen wronged by those Southron vipers. Spies carried those notes to King's Landing, stirring King Joffrey's temper until the boy king ordered the royal fleet doubled and taxes tripled. Such overreach fanned resentment along the Reach's coasts, sailors muttering that wolves and dragons might offer gentler masters than a conniving crown. Back in Qarth, months had passed. Drogon's wings spanned the height of a man, and his roars rattled the palace mosaics. Daenerys stood upon a balcony, gaze fixed on the Balerion, where laborers added reinforced planks of blackened cedar to widen her deck. The thought of sailing west quickened her pulse, yet each dawn unveiled fresh obstacles. Qarthine triarchs withheld grain. The warlocks brewed spite in hidden cellars, Slavers from Yunkai harassed the harbor. She could linger forever, fighting petty tyrants, or she could break the cycle. Decision came not in council, but night solitude. She recalled Glover's words, "If you two stand shoulder to shoulder," and realized no alliance lived within letters. It must be sealed by presence, forged in the eyes of those who would carve kingdoms. She summoned her captains. "Ready Balerian's sails. We ride to Astapor for the Unsullied, then Meereen. We free every chain to test the strength of this alliance. When the wolves see dragons free slaves, they will know our steel serves the same dawn." Jorah frowned. "That journey adds months, Khaleesi. The north may bleed dry before we return. Then we must bleed with purpose." She answered, "I will not arrive in Westeros as conqueror only. I will arrive as breaker of chains." Robb Stark fights for freedom as well. Let him see dragons choose chains to break over cities to burn. Then Galbart Glover bowed. "I will ride with you, to bear witness, and to shoulder the cost if the north grows wary." Meg Mormont clasped Jorah's shoulder in mute agreement. Bear Islanders could hardly refuse a fight against slavers. Even Ser Brynden, old soldier though he was, smiled grimly at the prospect of another campaign where honor outshone profit. So the convoy set sail south along scarlet-painted cliffs. In Astapor, they marched through red streets rank with cloves and blood, parleyed with the good masters whose masked sneers dripped contempt. Daenerys bartered a dragon, but reclaimed him in fire and betrayal, melting chains until the square echoed with broken steel. Across parchment seas, ravens carried word faster than wind. A dragon queen had freed 8,000 Unsullied and left a city's walls scorched but standing, its former slaves chanting Misa beneath smoke-pink dawn. Westeros trembled at the echo. On the march north toward Meereen, Daenerys rode at the head of the freed host. Glover studied the discipline of the Unsullied, marveling at how quickly shattered men could reform beneath shared purpose. Each night he penned new letters to the north, vowing that their queen-in-waiting had chosen justice over carnage. Yet justice bore a price in patience. Meereen's great pyramid loomed, and with it came sons of harpies, poisoned wells, masks of gold hammered thin as lies. Daenerys laid siege without fire, wanting to spare innocents. The siege lingered, dragging weeks into months. Each sunrise, news of Westeros darkened. Robb Stark's bannermen clashed with the Golden Lannister host in the Whispering Wood. Riverlands burned anew. King's Landing whispered of Tyrell marriages sealing southern alliances. Time slipped like water through mailed fists. One humid dusk, Glover found Daenerys beside a field hospital. She knelt among freed children bandaged with linen scraps, singing a lullaby in soft Valyrian lilt. Enric Gadri, Lysimbros. The wind carried translation enough. "Little dragon, do not weep." Her dragons circled overhead, shadows sweeping long over camps. Yet the children giggled. Fire that once terrorized Korth now guarded them from harpy knives. "Your grace," Glover murmured. "The north bleeds. If we delay longer." "I know." She rose, dusk wind fingering her braids. "But I cannot carve a throne for myself atop fresh graves. I mean to end cycles, not trade places with monsters." Glover met her gaze. Robb Stark would understand that desire. He, too, spares where others would slay. But the lions do not pause for mercy. They devour every heartbeat we delay. Beau. Daenerys inhaled deeply, the scent of orange blossoms crushed underfoot mingling with rot. "Then I must choose the lesser sin." She turned toward the pyramid rising ochre in sunset. "Tonight, Meereen surrenders. Tomorrow we sail. Fire and blood, but measured. Under cloak of darkness, dragons lit the night with controlled surges of flame. A warning? Not a massacre." Meereen's gates swung wide at dawn, its masters kneeling in dust. Daenerys stripped them of whips, not heads, and appointed freed scribes to govern until her return. The Unsullied loaded grain, cloth, and copper onto 90 ships under a new banner. A three-headed dragon entwined with gray direwolf. On Meereen's walls, Freedmen learned to howl like wolves in salute, foreign throats shaping a cry that spoke of winter and rebirth. The fleet departed on a wind that smelled of salt and possibility. Glover's chest tightened at the sight, dragons wheeling above masts where wolf banners snapped. Somewhere beyond the horizon lay his homeland, wounded but unbowed, waiting for a promise carved in fire to reach its shores. Weeks passed across the summer sea. Balerian's hull groaned but held true, built for monstrous weight. Dragons roosted on reinforced spars, eyes blazing at storms, but cowed by Daenerys' steady commands. At night she dined with Glover, Mage, and Sir Brynden, absorbing stories of the north, of heart trees whispering snow-white secrets, of hot pools steaming beneath Winterfell, of ghost lights in shivering sea mists. Each tale painted home in strokes of ice and pine. Those evenings forged a familiarity that soothed her loneliness, a sisterhood of outcasts orbiting a throne still unseen. One dawn, as rosy fingers brushed the waves, a cry from the crow's nest broke the hush. "Sail northwest!" Through spyglass, Glover sighted sleek warships bearing the kraken of House Greyjoy. The Ironborn prowled far from their isles, hunting prey. Their oars churned water into froth as sharp and hungry as their reavers' hearts. Daenerys stood at the prow, silver hair whipping. "Are they Stark allies?" "Traitors," Mage spat. "Greyjoys seek salt and ruin." Daenerys lifted her arm. Drogon shrieked overhead, answering. Rhaegal and Viserion joined, a trident of living flame. Unsullied drums beat a measured thunder. Glover glanced at the Dragon Queen. No uncertainty steeled her eyes now. Mercy had purpose, but so did wrath. The battle that followed was swift and terrible. Greyjoy ships closed in, axes raised, grapples ready, only to meet dragonflame that turned deck to furnace. Yet Daenerys, mindful of Westeros' listening ears, called her children back before the kill consumed all ships. One proud longship, its sails black as midnight tide, smoldered but did not sink. She allowed survivors to flee, carrying tales of a dragon wolf fleet sailing under dawnlight. When the enemy withdrew, Daenerys' fleet endured little damage beyond scorched sails. Glover bowed low. "You wield fear, yet not for pleasure. My king will honor such restraint." She touched Drogon's scaled snout, heart thumping. "I hope he will. For if we fail to wield fear justly, we become the tyrants we fought." On they sailed, windborne toward Pentos and the narrow seas chop. Each league closed decades of exile. And with each league, Daenerys' shoulders seemed to lift some invisible armor, bearing the woman beneath the queen. She practiced northern words at supper. "And Lord, aye, God's willing." Laughter echoing softly over clink of wooden plates. Even Jorah smiled, despite the fisher Meg's presence carved into his pride. At last the narrow sea's chop turned slate gray beneath autumn skies. White Harbor's lighthouse burned bright, its flame mirrored by distant campfires rimming the shore. Wolf banners fluttered on pikes, and columns of soldiers dotted the strand. Between them stood a single youth, flanked by great direwolf, gray and fanged. Robb Stark waited. Glover's pulse surged as anchors dropped. Unsullied formed corridors across gangplanks. Daenerys walked between lines of spears, dragons circling overhead casting swirling shadows. She wore simple riding leathers, no crown, no jewels beyond a collar of beaten silver shaped like coiled dragon tails. She wanted to arrive not as conqueror, but as partner. Robb bowed his head. "Your Grace." "I am Robb Stark, King in the North, son of Eddard." Daenerys inclined hers in equal measure. "Your Grace." "I am Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen." The shore fell silent, broken only by wind through pine. Grey Wind stepped forward, muzzle quivering, then gave a low, curious whine. Drogon banked overhead, answering with a keening note. Wolf and dragon regarded each other across a span of wet sand. Ancient symbols revisited in flesh. Neither attacked. Robb's hand brushed his direwolf's fur. "It seems our houses meet as our beasts do, warily yet unharmed." Daenerys' lips curved. "May they teach us." A hush lingered, sharper than steel, until Robb reached to his belt and drew a dagger. Not to threaten, but to bare his palm. In full view of his bannermen, he sliced a thin red line. Then he knelt, pressed his blood into the sand. I swear by ice and honor that the North stands with House Targaryen against all that would oppress the realm. Daenerys stepped forward, pricked her own thumb beneath a ruby-hilted knife, and let a droplet fall to mingle with his. And I, by fire and blood made new, swear to wield my dragons not as scourge, but as shield to those who remember. She offered her hand. Robb clasped it, a union of callus and flame. Around them, banners lifted, unsullied grounded spears. Northern archers lowered bows. Waves lapped, carrying northern cold to meet southern flame. No horns blared triumph, no cheers erupted. Only a great potent silence, as though the world inhaled before a long-awaited thaw. That silence broke when Grey Wind tilted his head and howled, a sound that rolled past dunes and into forest edges. From above, Drogon answered with a roar that rattled White Harbor's white stone walls. Two cries, wolf and dragon, braided across sky and sea, announcing a pact the world had not heard since the Age of Heroes. Daenerys felt Robb's grip tighten, not possessive, but certain. She met his gaze, blue as winter lakes, lined with sleepless resolve, and in that moment knew the shape of the realm they might shape together, not built upon ashes, but upon a ribbon of blood offered freely, wolf to dragon, north to south. The wind shifted, carrying the taste of snow mingled with smoke. Winter still loomed, and lions still roared along gilded roads. But for the first time since her brother sold her for a crown of bones, Daenerys felt warmth beyond the dragon's hearth. She felt possibility. Far overhead, Rhaegal and Viserion soared beside Drogon, circling like living constellations. Their shadows swept across Robb's crimson wound and Daenerys' silvered hair. In those shadows lay echoes of ancient prophecies, the song of ice and fire newly tuned to a truer harmony, slow and irrevocable. And as the fleet's masts creaked behind her, and 1,000 northern voices rose in tentative greeting, Daenerys realized that her journey had not ended upon Westeros' shore. It had only just begun. Dawn bled slowly over White Harbor, staining the thin autumn clouds, rose gold and stretching pale bars of light across the wharves. Crested gulls wheeled above the dragon-wolf banners that now lined the piers, their harsh cries mingling with the murmur of thousands of soldiers waking to a day unlike any the North had known in living memory. Smoke from cookfires drifted low, trapped by the cool sea air and carrying the mingled scents of fish stew, foreign spices, and boiling oats. Everywhere men and women watched the three dragons circle the city's beacon tower. Some rapt, some terrified, all changed by the sight. Robb Stark had slept in armor on a pallet laid in the old merman's court, surrounded by guards who pretended not to hear the anxious turns of their king's restlessness. When he pushed the furs aside and rose, Grey Wind sprang up too, tail sweeping flagstones. The dire wolf padded to the balcony casement and stared out at the morning sky where Drogon banked, black wings chopping the wind. Robb followed, bracing both hands on the sill. In the half-light, the dragon was a living shadow, vast and certain. Nothing like the leathery things he remembered from Maester Luwin's childhood tales. The alliance he had sought for in midnight prayers was now real, and the weight of it pressed upon his shoulders with a gravity fiercer than any Lannister host. Footsteps. Catelyn. She paused behind him, hair unbraided, gown hastily laced. Robb did not turn. "Do you believe the gods sent her, mother?" Catelyn rested a hand on his arm. "The gods send storms and sunshine both. It is for us to read their signs and steer." "No." He nodded, though the words were little comfort. "I swore ice and honor, yet I fear how the realm will name me when Dragonfire joins our war. They will name you victor, or they will name you nothing at all," Catelyn said, voice low. "We did not choose the weapons the lions forged against us. But we may choose allies whose cause rhymes with our own." Below, in the courtyard between the merman's court and the city wall, Daenerys Targaryen sparred with her bloodrider Jogo, while 100 northern swordsmen looked on. She wore boiled leather brigandine over quilted silk, no ornament save the silver bells at the ends of her braid. The curved arak in her hand flashed as she ducked beneath Jogo's swing and riposted, the flat clang ringing like a smith's hammer. Her breath smoked in the chill, but sweat beaded her brow. Robb watched in silence a while, noting the quickness of her feet, the fierce concentration that narrowed her violet eyes. Not the play of a court lady, but the practice of one who had fought to live. "She earns their respect sword edge first," he murmured. "Ace any Stark would." Catelyn squeezed his arm. "Come." They wait in council. The round tower chosen for the war council had once housed White Harbor's granary ledger keepers and still smelled faintly of dust and old ink. Now a long oaken table occupied its center, scarred by decades of quill scratches. Around it gathered a company unlike any Westeros had seen. Northern lords in wool and mail, Daenerys captains in quilted silks and boiled leather, unsullied officers with bronze masks shaped like speared fish, and the Dragon Queen herself at Robb's right hand. Robb noted who arrived first. Sir Brynden Tully and Galbart Glover unfurled a freshly drafted map of the King's Road corridor. Mage Mormont strode in after them, her bare pelt cloak shedding droplets of thawing frost. Sir Jorah entered with Barristan Selmy. Only after all others stood ready did Daenerys step through the arch, small but unbowed, and take her seat. Robb inclined his head. "Your Grace." She returned the nod. "Your Grace." A hush. Then Robb set both palms on the map. "Dotty. Our enemy gathers south of the neck." Sir Stafford Lannister marshals. At Harrenhal, reinforced by sellswords from the Golden Company. Sir Brynden tapped an ink-stained finger on the parchment. "If he marches before first snow, he'll reach Moat Cailin by mid-moon. The next causeways will choke our retreat." Daenerys studied the paper a moment, then glanced at Grey Wind lying behind Robb's chair, and finally at Drogon, who crouched outside the arrow slit, eye like a live coal fixed on the assembly. "Dragons may strike a marching column, but fire alone cannot hold ground," she said. "We must decide where flame serves and where steel must stand." Robb gestured to Sir Wendell Manderley. "Lord Wyman has offered 30 cogs to ferry our joint army up the coast and land behind Stafford's flank at Seaguard. A bold stroke, yet if the seas turn rough, we risk splitting wolves from dragons." Barristan Selmy's voice cut calm and precise. "Better to march together, your graces. Unsullied shield walls flanked by Northmen would be a wall of ice and spears. Let the dragons harry the foe from above while men of flesh deny them movement below. Stafford is no Tywin. Break his army in one blow, and the realm will hear." Bendawal. There were nods, but Sir Jorah tilted his head. "And what of King Stannis? A Baratheon banner still flaps above Dragonstone. He claims the Iron Throne by right of blood and law. He will not kneel to a dragon, nor to a wolf." Robb's jaw tightened. "Stannis may march north once he learns of our pact. He despises the Lannisters, but would sooner slit his own wrists than share victory." "Then?" Daenerys drummed slender fingers on the table, then stilled them. "We need time then to show Westeros another banner, one of justice, not only conquest. I freed the Unsullied. Let us free the Riverlands next. Word of rescued villages travels quicker than ravens." Maeg Mormont grinned broad as a bear. "March and free as we go?" "Aye, my queen. Nothing sweeter than taking back what lions stole." Dawen. The discussion wound on through the morning, narrowing and branching like winter streams. Supply lines up the Green Fork, Yunkish grain stores unloading in White Harbor, northern blacksmiths forging spear sockets sized for unsullied ash shafts, water discipline beneath the neck, ravens to the Blackfish's niece at River Run, and on and on. With every decision, a thin skein of understanding wove between foreign and familiar. Robb felt it tighten like sinew as Daenerys weighed possibilities with a strategist's patience, not the impetuous conqueror some had feared. Near midday, as they paused for mulled ale and oatcakes, a raven arrived on shaking wings, fur of snow still clinging to its claws. Maester Luwin broke the seal and read, then paled. Robb caught the movement. "Speak." Leuven cleared his throat. "The wall has sighted dead things moving in the haunted forest. Lord Commander Mormont rides beyond the gate. They ask for aid." Silence. The dragons outside hissed, wings rasping stone as if sensing chill beyond the mortal ken. Daenerys' gaze flicked to Robb. "Dead things?" Robb swallowed once. "Whites. The stories we told children." The unsullied Captain Greyhelm bent closer to his queen. "Forgive me, your grace, but we do not fight ghosts." Maeg Mormont barked a humorless laugh. "Linger in the north and you might." Robb looked at Daenerys. "The wall stands 800 feet tall, but thinly manned. If this threat proves real, all our wars are vanity. Yet, if we pull south to fight the lions, the wall falls." "Now," Daenerys considered, lips pressing. "I have no quarrel with ghosts, but I am mother to dragons, creatures of life fire. If death walks, perhaps fire answers." Barristan Selmy bowed his white head. "If the wall holds, we hold. Let the young Westeros watch their heroes join to guard its very soul." From across the table, Galbart Glover exhaled. "Then we march not to Seaguard first, but to Winterfell, mustering every bannerman we have left." Robb nodded slowly. "We break our enemy in the Riverlands afterward, but Winter's shadow comes first." House Stark was raised to guard the realms of men. Daenerys reached for the map again, sliding it to center. "Then let dragons see Winterfell reborn. And let the world see ice and fire ride together where the living need them most." That evening White Harbor blazed with torches and unaccustomed revelry. Word of the Queen's decision spread on lips astonished and hopeful. In tavern corners northern archers toasted unsullied spear sergeants with brown ale, while cell sails from the summer islands wagered on how swiftly a dragon might melt a giant's spine. Yet beneath the laughter lurked an unease as old as the first men. Tales of others pressed hard upon the imagination, and every gust of cold felt like fingers brushing down the spine. In Lord Wyman's grand feast hall, Robb presided over a sparse supper. Smoked trout and turnips, and refused wine more than twice. He spoke little, but his eyes tracked Daenerys across the room where she greeted northern ladies with Dothraki idioms and patient smiles. The Lord's daughters curtsied, half afraid, half enamored. One flaxen-haired squire from House Flint offered her a carved direwolf of driftwood. She accepted gravely, tucking it into her belt as though it were worth a crown. Catelyn watched the corridor of curiosity open between queen and bannerman. Later she found Daenerys alone near the frost-blurred windows. Dragons settled like warm stones at her feet. Violet eyes met blue-gray. "You win them gently," Catelyn said. Daenerys' voice was soft. "I learned young that hearts cannot be owned, only invited." She knelt to stroke Viserion's ivory scales. "I have known little family. Their welcome means more than they guess." Catelyn studied her. "Family is burden as well as comfort. My son shoulders the hopes of a cold land. By uniting with him, you shoulder them too." The younger woman rose, straightening her cuff. "I have carried chains and crowns, Lady Catelyn. I will carry hopes also. Yours among them." Tears pricked Catelyn's eyes before she could quell them. She turned aside, embarrassed, and spoke of Sansa still trapped in King's Landing, of Arya lost. Daenerys listened, then gently removed a tiny silver ring from her hand. A dragon biting its tail, and pressed it into Catelyn's palm. "For your daughter's return," she said. A circle unbroken. Catelyn closed fingers around it, and for the first time since Ned's death felt something akin to peace stir beneath her grief. 6 days of frantic preparation followed. White Harbor's yards rang night and day with hammer blows as armorers riveted new plates, sewed quilted arming coats, sharpened blades. Fleets of fisherfolk trawled the bight for cod to salt. Unsullied quartermasters filled wagons with sacks of Astapori grain and barrels of Sweetwater captured in copper-bound casks. Northern horsemasters attempted to accustom shaggy Garons to Dothraki's screeching whistles. The ponies tried to bite. At every intersection someone asked in wonder, "Did you see the dragons today?" On the seventh dawn, trumpets sounded from the lighthouse steps as the host began to move. The Unsullied marched first, 8,000 shields bright as new-coined silver. Each rank stepping in unison, the rhythm of heel and spear butt, like the pulse of a giant heart. Behind them rode the Queen's Dothraki outriders, their bells chiming low, half their number already cloaked in wolfskin gifts. Northern bannermen followed, two abreast. Karstark, Mormont, Glover, Risewell, Tallheart and more. A river of fur and mail. Then came the great wagon train of provisions, and at its rear, the dragons soared like trailing banners of night and flame. Robb and Daenerys rode together at the column's head, gray wind loping at the horses' flanks. Beside them paced Drogon, sometimes bounding skyward in short bursts that sent the horses sidestepping nervously. Robb wore a new cloak inked with a subtle seam where direwolf met dragon. Daenerys' cloak matched in reverse, the clasp shaped from northern silver mined at Frosthold. They spoke little, yet between them stretched a live current of intent, as though two sword edges touched and sparked. The march to Winterfell took 22 days. The autumn sun melted into grayer skies, the air sharpened, and frost rimed the morning grass. Along the King's Road small folk gathered to watch the army pass. Some knelt, crossing chests with trembling fingers. Others merely stared, open-mouthed, at the foreign legionaries in matching helms and the monstrous shapes overhead. No carts were burned, no livestock taken without silver or salt. When a village headman begged protection from bandits, an unsullied squad stayed 2 nights, leaving the roads safer than it had known in years. In the evenings, Robb's bannermen visited the Queen's pavilion and found her patient with questions. Young Lord Willem Little, cheeks still patchy with first beard, asked what dragonfire tasted like. Daenerys laughed and said, "Pepper and thunder," which became a joke repeated around cookfires for a week. Lord Manderley pressed her about trade rights for Wintertown. She spoke of opening Myraine's markets once the war ended. Bit by bit, suspicion thawed. Yet, not all hearts warmed. At dusk on the 14th day, Rickard Karstark's remaining son Harrion asked leave to speak privately with Robb. In the king's tent, he paced, restless. "Sire, we bled for vengeance after my brothers died in Jaime's trap. Now you place our fate in a girl's hands who did not know our pain. Wolves do not lap chains like milk." Robb heard him out, fingers steepled. "Nor do dragons." "She lost brothers too, murdered in her cradle. What would you have me do? Strike first. Burn the Red Keep while Lannisters still feast in arrogance. End them before snow calls your banners home." Harrion's eyes gleamed fever bright. "Spare no lion cubs." Robb's voice was quiet, iron beneath wool. "The Queen will not rule a field of skulls, and I will not either. Our father taught mercy is not weakness." Karstark's mouth twisted. Mercy ended his life, and lack of it ends kingdoms. Robb rose. "If your sword cannot serve this alliance, ride north to Karhold now. Guard our flank. But under my banner no child will burn." Silence. Harrion bowed stiffly and left, anger trailing him like smoke. Robb sagged onto the stool, palms to eyes, fatigue suddenly crushing. Across the canvas his mother's voice drifted in. "A king's crown is forged in other men's fires. Hold, and it burns you. Drop, and it drowns you. Ben Dawal." He thought then of Daenerys, whose blood yet walked with fire at her call, and wondered if she too felt the crowns burn each night. On the 20th day, the columns crested a low ridge south of the last river, and Winterfell came into view. Gray towers rising from a sea of crimson gold leaves. Steam ghosted from the hot pools, curling between broken battlements, still scaffolding from the iron-borne sack, years earlier. The sight wrenched Robb's chest. To Daenerys, it was a dream from songs, half remembered. The gates swung wide at their approach. Bran Stark stood in a basket seat, rigged to Hodor's back, Maester's cloak flapping round thin shoulders. Beside him, Osha the wildling gripped a spear. Young Rickon darted ahead with Shaggy Dog nipping, only to be caught by Sir Roderick's gauntleted hand. The gathering courtyard rang with shouted welcomes and the stamping of hooves. When Daenerys' dismounted Grey Wind ambled forward, sniffed her gloved hand, and gave one soft chuff. She stroked his muzzle. "He smells dragons on me," she said gently. Robb chuckled, tension easing for a heartbeat. "He smells friend." They entered the great hall beneath twin banners newly hung. The direwolf and the three-headed dragon intertwined above the dais. Fires blazed in every hearth, and the smell of fresh bread mingled with pine resin. Bran's voice, lower than Robb remembered, greeted Daenerys formally. Shaggy Dog snarled at Drogon until the dragon snorted steam that singed the reeds on the floor. Rickon shrieked with childlike glee, and the whole uneasy household seemed suddenly alive again, as though a lost limb had been found. That night, the stark words were spoken in the godswood, under the ancient weirwood, its red leaves whispering like distant wings. Bran dipped fingers into the hot spring and let the water run over the queen's hands. Robb watched silently while Daenerys knelt before the heart tree, face upturned to the bloody-mouthed bark. The old gods were not hers, yet she bowed. The wind shivered, the pool rippled. Somewhere an owl hooted. Later, in the warm shade of the broken first keep, Jon Snow arrived in cloaked haste, having ridden from the wall with two brothers. His reunion with Robb was fierce and wordless, a tangle of embraces and tears they pretended not to shed. Then Jon turned to Daenerys, taking in the dragons perched atop the gargoyle-spattered roof. He bowed, stiff. "My queen." She regarded him curiously. "You have your father's eyes." Jon's mouth tightened. "I have my vows." "Vows to the living?" She answered softly. "And we are here for them." He nodded once, reluctant admiration flickering across his face. "The dead gather. We saw them, white as rime, and their eyes, blue, brighter than the coldest star. They slew the scouting party outside the Frostfang range. Only I and Dolorous AD escaped." "Ah." Robb's stomach clenched. "How many?" "A dozen we saw. More in the pines." Jon drew a pouch from his belt, upending it onto the flagstones. "Shards of blackened glass. When we burned the corpses, the others shattered like this." Daenerys reached out, fingertips brushing a fragment. It was cold beyond winter. Cold that drank the warmth from her skin. She closed her fist around it until it cut her palm. "Fire," she whispered. "And dragon steel." Jon met her gaze. "Dragon glass." Barristan Selmy stepped forward. "Valyrian lore speaks of such. Forged in dragon flame mixed with shadow." Jon lifted a second pouch. "We mined as much obsidian as we could from the foothills, but forging blades that hold an edge is slow. Maesters know little of it." Daenerys uncurled her palm. Blood welled bright. "Then we teach them." She glanced at Robb. "Let every hearthsmith in the north turn their bellows to this purpose. If fire births the spear that fells the dead, fire will supply it." None. A plan took shape that night beneath Winterfell's roof, forged by voices once scattered across worlds. Jon's stark witness, Robb's tactical instinct, Daenerys' dragonflame promise, and Bran's sudden quiet insight. Eyes clouding white as he spoke of a vision of three heads. Eyes clouding white as he spoke of a vision of three heads circling a heart of obsidian beneath the earth. The young maester scribes who listened would tell children that history bent in that hour, though no sword was drawn. Days lengthened within Winterfell's walls as armies reorganized. Unsullied companies drilled side by side with Manderley pikemen under the watch of Grey Helm and Sir Brynden. Dragons tested their flame on abandoned siege towers outside the broken east wall. Mormont spears kept watch lest sparks set forests alight. Blacksmiths dug new forges fed with weirwood coal. A risky sacrilege pacified only after Bran claimed the trees would lend their fire gladly if it saved the living. Into those forges poured obsidian dust shipped from the wall, and from them emerged arrowheads dark as midnight glass. Jon Snow found himself liaison between Night's Watch and the host. He walked the outer yards with Ser Jorah, trading lessons in sword forms and stories of Longclaw's forging. The sight of the Bear Island exile sparring with the bastard son of Winterfell drew curious onlookers and muttered gossip. Old assumptions fractured like ice in spring. Meanwhile, maesters worked beneath candlelight copying Daenerys' memories of Valyrian glyphs, describing dragonglass lore. She sat with them nightly, tracing letters long dormant, while Drogon coiled behind her chair, emitting occasional smoke rings that blotted the parchments with soot. The scribes dared not complain. One crisp morning, Bran summoned Daenerys to the half-ruined library tower. She climbed the spiral stair alone, weary of the loose stones. At the top, Bran waited in his wheeled chair, his wolf Summer stretched at his side. A pale light seeped through arrow slits. "I dreamed last night," Bran said without greeting. "I flew with your dragons." Daenerys blinked. "You rode them." "I was them." His voice held neither awe nor fear, only certainty. "I saw an ice river where dead things marched, and a hill of skulls where a lion watched." He fixed her with ancient eyes. "The song of ice and fire is not finished. You must go south before the first full moon after midwinter's night, or the Skull Hill becomes a mountain." She knelt beside him. A chill not of winter crept down her spine. "Do you know what waits there? An old debt, and a last roar." Bran's gaze unfocused. "The dragons know. Ask them." She touched his hand. So small, bones bird-light. "Thank you." Descending, she found Drogon crouched upon the battlement facing south. His neck ridges trembled, a low rumble deep in his chest. She laid a palm to his warm scale. "You heard," she whispered in high Valyrian. "We have more fires to light." But southward in the red stone halls of the Red Keep, another council was already underway. Cersei Lannister stood beside the Iron Throne, gold hair coiled like a coronet, while her son perched upon the steel seat, legs too short to reach the foot spikes. Joffrey's voice quavered between pubescent squeak and venom. "Dragons in the north? Lies?" He swung Widow's wail petulantly, the Valyrian sword rasping against steel. Grand Maester Pycelle trembled. "Your Grace, ravens from Lords Grafton and Hunter speak of beasts with wings wider than a galley's mast." Lord Tywin's eyes were stone. "Facts are forged in fire and fear. If wolves and dragons merge, we face a war on two fronts." The council argued. "Send emissaries to Stannis, bribe the Iron Bank to cripple northern loans. Hire Kuhorik crossbowmen famed for killing wyverns." Yet beneath the noise Tywin gauged each risk. He dismissed Pycelle and Qyburn, then summoned Sir Meryn to fetch a certain dark-haired cell kept in the dungeon. Late that night, the Hand walked the dungeons himself, torches guttering gold, and spoke low to the prisoner. When he left, shadows seemed deeper than before. 2 days later, ravens flew south from the capital bearing terms of outrageous generosity to Prince Doran Martell in Sunspear. Gold, trade ports, and whispered in cipher, "The head of the mountain who rides." Tywin's net was stretching wider than even Cersei realized. Winterfell's first winter snow fell silent one dusk, while Jon Snow trained recruits in the yard. Fat flakes stuck in his hair. The dragons shook wings and sent them swirling. Robb emerged from the armory, gauntlets off, palms blistered, to stand beside Daenerys watching the flakes smear against the dragon's dark membranes. "First snow," he murmured. "You should see it in full storm. Castle gone white, silent as prayer." She smiled faintly. "Essos has dust storms. They bury cities too. But the sand gives no quiet." He studied her profile, the curve of cheek lit by forge glow. "When the snows deepen, Northmen hunker round hearths and tell tales. I would hear yours one day." She turned to face him. "And I yours." A hush stretched between them, not awkward, but heavy with paths not yet chosen. Then Grey Wind trotted up, playfully snapping at snowflakes. Drogon ducked his head, snorting white steam in the direwolf's face. Grey Wind growled softly but did not retreat. Robb laughed, the sound startling warm. "They will fight side by side before the wall falls," Daenerys said. "And we behind them." Robb's laughter died into acceptance more than fear. "My lady, there may come a night when Winterfell has no roof strong enough to shield your dragons. Steel and ice will clash, and the sky itself may break open." "Then? Skies break?" she answered. so light may fall through. She laid a hand to his forearm, brief as breath. Hold to that. Jon watched from across the yard, thoughtful. Within a fortnight, the first supply wagons rolled north toward the wall, escorted by Queen's guards in white cloaks, newly embroidered with running wolves. Obsidian blades, arrows, and spearheads filled the crates. Barrels of lamp oil promised makeshift wildfire. A smaller party rode ahead. Jon Snow, Ser Jorah, Maege Mormont, and an unsullied vanguard bearing the sigil of a red-scaled direwolf. They were to reinforce Castle Black's garrison and test the effect of dragonfire against whites in controlled skirmish. Robb tasked Lady Galbart to follow with the main army in 10 days, leaving Winterfell a staging ground. Meanwhile, word arrived that Harrenhal had fallen not to Lannisters, but to a mysterious host bearing black iron kraken banners. Victarion Greyjoy now held the castle, cutting Stafford's retreat. The game board Robb and Daenerys had studied shifted once more, like sand under tide. One cold afternoon, as Catelyn stitched by firelight, Daenerys entered the solar holding a rough parchment sketch Bran had drawn. A dragon and a wolf intertwined about a flaming sword. He calls it the sigil of the dawn to come, she told the Lady of Winterfell. Catelyn set aside her needle and traced the lines. Dawn is good. Yet dawn comes only after night's longest hour. Daenerys sat. You fear for your son. I fear for all sons, even lion cubs, though I hate their pride. Catelyn folded her hands. But I have learned hate kills the hater first. Daenerys' gaze drifted to the hearth. When my brother sold me to the Dothraki, I hated him, until I saw hate devour him from within, leaving only golden blood on his face. I vowed never to drink that poison again. She looked up. If the wall breaks, lions and wolves alike will be prey. Perhaps hate will finally starve. Catelyn managed a tremulous smile. Perhaps. They sat together, two women once oceans apart, knitting threads of a world they hoped to save. On the eve of the host's departure, Winterfell's Godswood hosted one last council. Bran presided from his chair beneath the heart tree. Jon Snow had returned, clothes scorched, but eyes alight. Dragons burn whites to ash instantly, he reported. Obsidian knives fell them too, though one must strike hard. The others themselves we have yet to meet again. Robb paced, cloak swirling. We march in dawn 3 days hence. Bran, what say the trees? The boy shut his eyes. A hush fell. Leaves rustled though no wind blew. When Bran spoke, his voice layered older than his years. North wind brings a white tide, but fire on the ice bridge melts paths through doom. Seek the night fort before the first shadow moon. There the wall is weakest, and the key is hidden in the oldest gate. Then terror. Silence. Then perplexed murmurs. The night fort was a ruin, abandoned longer than any living memory. Daenerys kneeled before Bran. What key, little raven? Bran's lids fluttered. Steel black as sorrow, quenched in starfire. It waits beneath the well of faces. Maester Luwin frowned. A sword? Robb rubbed his chin. Or a horn? Tales speak of one that could bring the wall down. Jon inhaled sharply. Or raise it higher. Daenerys rose. Then we ride to the night fort. She looked to Robb, challenge and resolve entwined. He nodded. The die was cast, path chosen. When the great host streamed from Winterfell's gates the next dawn, snow whipped sideways across the fields. At the van rode Daenerys on silver-haired Ghost, a northern stallion gifted by Robb, dragons sweeping overhead. Robb rode Red Rain beside her. Bran remained at Winterfell with Catelyn to hold the heart of the realm. Maester Luwin stayed to coordinate ravens. Ghost the dire wolf loped with Jon at the column's edge, mirror to Grey Wind. The journey to the wall felt like a march into myth. Villages thinned. Forests grew dark and close, branches laden with white. Strange sounds carried on the wind. Cracks, distant shrieks, the whine of ice shifting under weight. The army camped in wary silence, fires burning blue in the cold. Unsullied suffered stoically. but even they muttered of spirits glimpsed beyond torchlight. On the fourth night, a storm descended, blinding white. Tents ripped. Horses panicked. Daenerys emerged from her pavilion, hair plastered to her face, eyes narrowing against stinging needles of snow. Drogon reared, roaring flame that turned flakes to steam. For a heartbeat, the camp glowed red, silhouette stark against infernal light. The storm recoiled, swirling about the outer ring, as though sensing a threat it could not swallow. Robb caught her arm. "You'll burn the camp," she shouted over wind. "A circle only. Shelter within." He signaled runners. Soon the Unsullied formed a ring, spears down, shields angled. Northern archers braced behind them. Within this living palisade, the dragons breathed a controlled barrier of heat, melting snow into a moat that refroze glass smooth beyond. All night the wind howled, but inside, the army drowsed in uneasy warmth. A miracle sung in hushed voices come dawn. The tale of the Dragon Queen's wall of fire carried ahead like sparks on wind. The night fort reared from the blizzard 3 days later, a carcass of black stone and rotten timbers crouched against the colossal pale face of the wall. Its gates hung askew. Within, courtyards were knee-deep in drift. Stories claimed cannibal cooks, and cold dead things haunted its passages. Most men refused to enter. But Robb, Jon, Daenerys, Meg Mormont, and a dozen picked scouts pressed inside, torches flickering. Wind moaned through gaps and shuttered arrow loops. The well Bran had named yawned in the oldest courtyard, its lip ringed by frost-rimed stones carved with faces long worn smooth. Jon examined them. "The well of faces," he murmured. "Old as the wall itself." Robb anchored a rope, and down they descended, one by one, into blackness that smelled of ice and forgotten ages. At the bottom, torchlight glinted on something half-buried, a bundle wrapped in chains of black iron. Meg and Ser Jorah heaved it free. When the cloth peeled back, a sword lay revealed, slender, rippled metal dark as smoke. Yet when torchlight kissed its edge, it flashed with subtle rainbows like oil on water. Daenerys knelt, reaching out. The blade hummed faintly. A vibration felt more than heard. She drew it, testing balance. It weighed no more than a child's stick. Jon touched the flat and hissed as if stung. "It's ice cold, yet doesn't freeze." Robb stared, all burning through. "Starfire," he whispered. They ascended, sword wrapped once more. In the courtyard Drogon landed, snow flurries spinning off in crystalline spirals. The dragons sniffed the blade, then recoiled slightly, as though recognizing kinship and peril at once. Above, the sky bruised purple. An unnatural hush fell. Then from the forest edge beyond the ruined gate, shapes emerged. Pale, gaunt, eyes blazing sapphire. Whites, dozens, maybe 100, trudging through knee-deep snow as if it were air. Behind them, on an elk taller than a horse, rode a figure clad in ice armor wrought like frozen latticework. The walker Jon had glimpsed on the fist of the first men. "Form ranks," Robb bellowed. Horns rang, unsullied shields locked, northern axes lifted. Jon fitted a dragon-glass arrow and muttered a prayer to the old gods. Daenerys handed the Starfire sword to Robb. "Try." He drew steel. The blade seemed to sing, screaming like wind through a high pass. The walker halted, tilting its crystalline head. Robb strode forward, gray wind at his side. Snow hissed as falling flakes met the blade's cold fire. Behind him, Daenerys mounted Drogon. The dragon's flame lit red across the yard, casting moving shadows tall as towers. The walker raised an ice spear and advanced. Whites rushed, shrieking. Arrows of obsidian felled the first ranks. Unsullied held firm, spears punching through brittle bone. Northern axes shattered skulls. But for every white that fell, another clambered over the corpse. Drogon swept a curtain of fire, incinerating a dozen at once. Yet the walker strode unharmed through the steam. Frost sizzled on its armor. It met Robb in the center of the courtyard. Spear met sword with a crack like breaking glaciers. For a heartbeat time froze. Ice and Starfire locked. Robb gritted teeth. muscles trembling. The spear's tip shaved sparks from the dark blade. Then the starfire pulsed. White-blue burst, and the spear shattered, shards skittering across stone. The walker staggered. Gray wind leapt, jaws clamping the creature's arm. Robb swung. The sword bit airless cold flesh. And the walker exploded into a storm of glimmering frost. No gore, only crystals that dissolved before touching ground. A ripple passed through the whites. They shuddered, then collapsed, strings cut. Silence crashed down, broken only by the crackle of dying flames. Robb lowered the sword, chest heaving. Snowflakes landed on the blade and vanished in puffs of mist. Across the courtyard, Daenerys slid from Drogon's neck, eyes shining. Jon stood transfixed, bow slack in hand. The Unsullied parted as Mage Mormont strode forward. "Well?" she growled, voice thick with wonder. "Looks like winter has reason to fear." Robb met Daenerys' gaze across the field of melting ice. In that instant, he felt the weight of all that lay ahead. Lion hosts. But also the fierce certainty that together they had shifted the axis of the world. He raised the starfire sword overhead. A cheer rose, ragged but growing, filling the night fort's ruins, echoing up the wall's vast face. Dragons roared in answer, direwolves howled, and somewhere beyond the fallen walker, the forest itself seemed to sigh, ancient and relieved. Night was not defeated, but night had met its dawn-bearers. And so beneath a sky blooming with northern lights, wolf and dragon stood side by side in the ruin of the old castle, bearing a blade forged when the world was young, planning the march yet to come. Lions sharpened claws far to the south. Krakens tightened coils around riverstones. Flowers unfurled deadly perfumes under golden sun. But the north had woken to fire, and Westeros would never again sleep easy in the dark. Oh, Ka. Snowmelt dripped from the shattered eaves of the night fort as dawn edged pale gold across the wall, hallowing the colossal ice face in austere radiance. Ed the Raven croaked somewhere above the well of faces, protesting the lingering ghosts. Jon Snow stood upon a fallen lintel amid a graveyard of crystal shards that had been whites hours before, and watched steam curl from the starfire blade where Robb knelt, cleaning it with a cloth already ragged from the unnatural cold it shed. Around them, Unsullied stacked the bodies that could still burn, while northern bowmen prowled for signs of a second assault. No one spoke loudly, and awe lay upon the ruin, fragile as first frost. Daenerys passed between sentries without escort, her breath clouding in the brittle air. She felt the echo of the walker's demise still humming in her bones, a silent strike of iron on bell that reverberated through marrow and dreams. Drogon perched atop the night fort's east tower, wings mantled, gaze sweeping forest and sky. Every so often a puff of black smoke leaked from his nostrils, as though the very memory of the cold things offended him. Rhaegal and Viserion circled higher, silhouettes against a bruised horizon, their shrieks keening thin and distant like the pipes of unseen gods. Robb looked up when she approached. Exhaustion ringed his eyes dark, yet triumph lent him a fierce vitality she had never seen elsewhere. A warrior's euphoria tempered by quiet terror at what greater foe must follow. He bound the sword in oiled leather, tying the knots himself with numbed fingers. She knelt to help, their heads close, the breath of each lingering like ghosts between them. "We name it Heartsbane," he whispered. Not the roar of declaration, but a pledge spoken to the dawn itself, for it slew what has no heart to beat. Her answer came soft. "Let the wall remember." A small figure shuffled near. Dolorous Ed Tollett, black cloak bedraggled, cleared his throat. "Beg pardon, your graces, but if that shiny icicle of doom can cut more of the pale folk, the lads up top would greatly fancy a demonstration. Morale, you might say, living on hope and oatcakes, what taste of mold we do." Robb nearly smiled. Daenerys did. "Soon," she promised. "First warm your bones." "Bones are warm enough," Ed muttered. "It's the rest I worry for." Yet he saluted with the stiff pride of a man who knows absurdity is the last shield against dread, and trudged off. They rose. Jon joined them, long claw sheathed but unpolished, leather scratched from hard blows. Ravens flew before sunrise. The watch will muster every ranger left. Lord Mormont means to meet us at Queensgate in 5 days with fresh stores from Eastwatch. He tilted a look between them that carried weight beyond command. I have never seen men fight as one as they did under wolf and dragon banners. Word of this will race the entire length of Westeros by nightfall. Tywin will be sharpening quills for pardons and plowshares by the time snow covers his roses, Robb said. But Jon shook his head. Or forging darker schemes. Lions cornered Thrash hardest. Daenerys agreed, thinking of the cryptic glare in Tywin's green-gold eyes the last time she spied him across a Meereenese war table, disguised within spies' reports. He will harness dread of dragons to rally every house that fears fire more than ice. Our proof of the other's rise must outpace his parchments. She gestured toward the corpse pyres already kindled in the yard. The flames licked at tattered black garments and half-melted swords. In the heat, the night's snowfall hissed to vapor, and gilded the wind with flecks of gray ash. Unsullied formed a silent perimeter, so embers would not drift into stables or tents. Their impassive masks reflected orange light, turning every soldier into a bronze specter. Robb watched them. We must depart before midday. Winterfell is 5 days' march south, but with wounded, it may stretch longer. I want the forge masters working on new arrowheads the moment we return. We can push faster, Daenerys said. My Dothraki ride light and unsullied march like river currents. Send the wounded by sled to Queen's Crown and keep our vanguard nimble. Robb weighed and nodded. So, a horn called thrice, thin and distant, scouts signaling no further threat. Relief sagged shoulders across the yard. Jon exhaled slowly. It will not be so easy next time. That walker was probing, nothing more. Then let us probe deeper. Daenerys answered. If Bran's visions prove true, there is a heart of winter beating beyond the shivering sea, and we will meet it on ground of our choosing. Robb looked at her as though the iron links of their fates had clicked one notch tighter. Ground of dragon fire, he said. Ground of living flame. She corrected gently. Kindled in all hearts able to feel. He almost reached for her hand, stopped, then squeezed her forearm in warrior's clasp. We move. So began the great withdrawal from the night fort. A backward step that was no retreat, but the purposeful drawing of breath before a harder strike. Sleds laden with wounded creaked through ankle-deep drifts, guided by Night's Watch brothers and Dothraki horse herds unfamiliar with harness, but quick learners. War tents folded, leaving ghostly outlines in fresh snow. Obsidian caches were packed into wax-lined chests. Barrels of arrow shafts followed. Overhead, the dragons kept vigilant serpentine patterns that cast vast undulating shadows across the wall, filling even the most weary soldier with a flicker of fierce pride. Beyond the neck, autumn had soured into winter's first true grip, frosting the reeds of the Fever River and draping the twins in hoarfrost that sparkled like glass teeth. Walder Frey huddled by a brazier in his drafty hall, scowling over the latest raven perched sullenly upon his shoulder pad. The parchment dangled in a trembling hand spotted with age. King Robb Stark had flown the dragon wolf atop the wall and felled a walker with a blade too strange for any bard's tongue. Walder spat into the brazier. Fables and lies, he wheezed. Though the rumor had arrived from 3 separate sources and bore the seal of his own grandson Sir Hosteen, the old man's curses rattled like dry corn husks. Madness, he told himself. Yet a frightening, stirring madness, the sort that might make his younger bannermen rethink which crown paid their scut work. He tossed the letter in the fire and slumped deeper in his furs, but sleep did not find him that night. Across the Trident, the same whispers raced through alehouses and sept yards, crossing fields faster than ravens. At River Run, Edmure Tully limped on new-heeled leg to greet a courier from the Brotherhood, without banners, who claimed he had seen dragons in the north sky, and that the fires of R'hllor had answered in dancing shapes above their open-air shrine. At Highgarden, Lady Marguerite paused. while clipping a rose with silver shears. The thorns prick on her finger forgotten as a breathless servant repeated a hedge knight's tale that a Dira queen commanded balefire from the heavens. She smiled serenely, turned away, and penned a coded note to her grandmother. A continent south in Sunspear, Prince Doran Martell sifted fragments of the same tale while seated in his water gardens. Parchment and rumor, and the glimmering possibility of vengeance long deferred. When the gull's cry overhead briefly reminded him of Rhaegar's laughter on the beach at Sunspear decades earlier, his knuckles whitened on his cane. He ordered the letter from King's Landing read twice more. Tywin's sudden generosity hardened his suspicions. "Send a silent sister to King's Landing," he told Ariohota. "She shall be my eyes." He paused, then whispered a single name. "Nymeria." The captain's brows rose, but he bowed and strode off. Doran watched the fountain's water drip, 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 imagining droplets of cold running down marble dragons. In Old Town, fog crawled the cobbles outside the citadel as Samwell Tarly pored over a crumbling scroll's marginalia. Valyrian runes, referencing horns of winter and their resonance with blood of the dragon. His candle drooped wax onto his sleeve. He absently flicked it off, heartbeat tripled. Gilly's child slept near a brazier with good linen borrowed from Pate. Sam dashed new lines into his leather journal, remembering Joan's parting plea. "Learn all you can of the dead, and the living fire that stops them." He swallowed, the weight of duty pressing heavy on his gentle bulk. Then leaned into the tome again. Meanwhile, the great host skirted the King's Road in a sinuous column. Each day the air grew crisper, the sky a brilliant hard blue that seemed to ring like iron above endless pine. Robbed scouts reported little sign of Lannister activity this far north, though tracks of Ironborn raiders bled occasionally across the snow. A burnt croft, a stolen ox. Typically they found the raiders' corpses flung miles from the road, charred black by dragonfire. Drogon hunted with silent precision, leaving few survivors to carry tales. Yet Daenerys insisted on interrogating those few, offering coin and mercy for information, rather than swift death. When one grizzled reaver spat at her boots and croaked, "Black Wing shall bow afore the Kraken soon," Jorah slit his throat without command, but she flinched, displeased. Mercy, she believed, must be banked like coin, else borrowing later cost twice. Robb observed this dynamic with both admiration and wariness. On the third night after leaving the night fort, he stood by the central cook fire, gnawing a strip of salt pork, when Mage Mormont joined him. Snowflakes clung to her bare-pelt shoulders. She followed his gaze to the Queen's Pavilion, where dim candlelight silhouetted Daenerys leaning over a map, with Grey Worm and Missandei. "You watch her, the way men watch flares at sea," Meg said bluntly. "Dazzling, but mind they don't blind." Robb grunted. "And what would you counsel?" "The North kneels to no one." She tipped her chin. "But it can love. Be sure she knows our love is fierce as frostbite and just as permanent." She slapped his backplate and stomped away. He did not sleep for a long time afterward, nor did he cross the ice patch of space between their tents. Daenerys herself slept even less. Each dream carried her back to shadowed corridors of Meereen, where children mewled under harpy masks, or to the red wastes where Viserys' voice rose like broken glass in the scorching air, calling her wheat. Yet always Drogon arrived, bursting through dream walls, breathing golden heat that seared the ghosts away. She would wake slick with sweat despite the cold, reaching for the dragon's reassuring rumble outside her tent before reclaiming calm. On such a night, she rose and slipped outside, cloak flung over thin night garb. A hush blanketed the camp, broken only by distant watch calls and the pop of smoldering logs. She walked toward the picket line where the horse ghost grazed, white maned silver under stars. Jon Snow leaned against the gelding's withers, wool cloak drawn close, eyes reflective. He nodded. "Can't sleep either? Dreams stir louder than the wind tonight." She answered, "I thought to test their truth by starlight." He glanced at the constellations. "The throat is clear. Old Nan said that foretells great crossings." She smiled faintly. "Old Nan is wise." They stood in comfortable quiet. Ghost the dire wolf slid from shadows, red eyes gleaming, and pressed his muzzle to her hand. She scratched behind his ear, marveling at his velvet-soft fur and the subdued rumble of approval. Dragon landed beyond the camp's edge, with a dull thump of wings, snow fountains erupting around his talons. For a heartbeat, dragon and wolf locked gazes again, ancient enmities forgotten at the world's pivot. Then Drogon snorted, looked away. Jon watched. He grows daily. Soon he'll dwarf Aegon the Conqueror's mount. And now, soon. Echoed softly, and wondered what weight that word truly carried. How soon before she must release him against men, not monsters? She shivered, not from cold. Jon noticed. Our fires burn bright, Daenerys, but light alone won't persuade those who fear flame. There's talk among Karstark spearmen. I heard, she said. They hate Lannisters, yet dragons frighten them more. He adjusted his cloak. Stannis once told me men remember only the simplest moral: burn or freeze. We must teach them a third. Live. She whispered. He nodded. Live. They parted then, the quiet understanding enough. Her steps back to the pavilion felt lighter, though the dreams returned before long. At Winterfell the forges roared day and night. Bran oversaw operations from a lofted platform rigged near the armory door, so he could watch the casting molds fill with molten iron laced with powdered obsidian. He insisted his mind's eye saw the structure of each blade's grain as it cooled. Smiths learned to trust his odd pronouncements. Quench now, not later. Strike thrice, not twice. Because every time, the metal emerged stronger, edge keener, than conventional craft allowed. They began calling him Green Warden, half in jest. Yeah. Catelyn watched from the great hall balcony, hands clasped tight enough to whiten knuckles, as children not yet old enough for milk spears fetched buckets of snowmelt to douse red-hot tongs. Fear warred with pride inside her. She prayed each night to the old gods and knew that her remaining sons might live to old age. Yet she still stitched the dragonwolf banners with needlepoint so precise, it drew blood from her fingertips. Sometimes Daenerys came to sit with her, showing how the free cities twined silver threads through silk. In those hours the hall glowed with an energy that reminded Cat of days before Ned journeyed south. Laughter, domestic routine, the illusion of ordinary life, even as ruin encircled the realm. One afternoon, while the women worked, Bran entered unexpectedly, wheelchair clattering. His face looked older again. Every vision aged him months. "Mother," he said gravely. The weirwoods dream of a horn carved from the heart of a direwolf, black as midnight. He held out a folded parchment. Maester Luwin has drawn its markings. It lies on Skagos. Skagos, the island of cannibals and unicorns, ice winds, and crag goats. Catelyn's stomach flipped as though on a ship's deck. "My darling, Skagos is 3 days' sail through broken-tooth currents. No captain would go willingly." "They will," Bran said. "The horn is named Winter's Breath. It must be blown where the wall meets the sea, or the ice will crack like glass." Daenerys intercepted the parchment, studying the runes. They matched no Valyrian she knew, yet some symbols resembled Kaskari glyphs for despair. Broken, release. She traced one angle thoughtfully. "I will ask Missandei to cross-translate, Bran. We will learn its purpose." "Purpose is simple," Bran murmured, and his irises clouded milky white for a heartbeat. "It calls the sleeping to awake. Either side may use it." Catelyn swayed. Daenerys gripped her elbow till color returned. "We shall guard the secret, little brother," the queen said. But secrets disperse like smoke through cracked doors. Within a week, rumors reached the camp of Robb and Daenerys mid-March. A horn of winter that could topple the wall, or raise giants from glaciers. Harry and Karstark confronted Robb during evening rations, voice pitched low but hard. "Is it true?" he demanded. We chase glass arrows while the real defense lies rusting on some savage isle? Robb's patience snapped. You chase our victory, or you chase death elsewhere. Choose. Harrion glared, but the conviction in the king's eyes offered no gap for dissent. He stalked away, leaving Robb shaking. Grey Wind whined and licked his hand. Robb scratched behind the direwolf's ear, then gazed toward Daenerys' pavilion. Light silhouettes danced inside. Her and Missandei, perhaps, mapping the next 7 moves of this endless game. Resolve hardened. They would take Skagos, find the horn, and decide its fate, whether to blow, to bury, or to break. Far to the south, the Red Keep's ravenry churned like a disturbed anthill. Lord Tywin Lannister read each dispatch with the dispassionate air of a jeweler appraising flawed gems, sorting slivers of truth from dross. His intuition confirmed what he long suspected. Euron Greyjoy had seized Harrenhal, not merely to spite the lions, but to bargain a throne of his own. The Kraken intended to sail up the neck, perhaps plunder the Barrowlands, maybe even attempt to extract the Manderley's fleet in White Harbor, while wolves and dragons bled in the true north. Tywin penned responses to each threat with icy clarity, repositioning forces, bribing Free Company captains to delay sailing north, dispatching Qyburn to treat with the Iron Bank about a loan denial for Stark emissaries. Yet the old lion suspected none of it would matter if the tales of the undead proved half true. Secretly, he ordered wildfire stockpiled beneath Beller's Sept and the Kingswood. Cersei, meanwhile, plotted in separate shadows, less interested in the undead than in the living queen who stole her legend. Tales of Daenerys' beauty and courage swept King's Landing taverns like fever. The common folk began carving crude dragonwolf sigils on shutters. Gold cloaks pulled them down at dawn. Cersei took her frustrations to Qyburn's dark cellars, where a giant of a man lay upon a stone slab, chest stitched with black thread, resting. "When will he wake?" she hissed. "Soon, your grace," Qyburn assured. "His marrow drinks fire." Cersei pressed a hand to the thing's brow. It felt colder than the other's rumor. She smiled. On the stepstones, Stannis Baratheon read the same reports and bristled. Dragons? He, rightful king, had prayed for signs, but not this. He ordered Salladhor Saan to ready the fleet for immediate sail north. The Lyseni pirate grumbled about storms and whites, but Stannis' coin still shone. Melisandre watched flames lick at the painted table's edges. Seeing shapes of direwolves and dragons entwined, her lips parted in a rapturous gasp. "Azor Ahai rides with frosted steel," she murmured, "and the Sword of Light sleeps in shadow. You must claim it, my king." But the king only grunted. "I'll claim what's owed first, the realm." Robb and Daenerys reached Winterfell again on the 3rd morning, a homecoming and rally cry. Trumpets rang, gates flung wide. Bran wheeled to greet them, Catelyn standing at his side, tears refusing to be contained. Smiths raised the Starfire blade over the courtyard, cheers erupting. Dragons landed on the battlements, tails curling like living banners. The scent of fresh bread and pine tar mingled with dragonfire. Suddenly, every memory of old Stark winters collided with unimaginable change. They convened council that very afternoon in the Solar. Bran laid out Skagos on a vellum chart, describing wind patterns and reefs. Davos Seaworth, summoned by Raven from White Harbor, arrived still smelling of salt, gray beard flecked with spray. He studied the map. "Ugly waters there," he admitted. "I've slipped, though worse." Robb clasped his wrist in greeting. "You'll command our foray?" If Mum Grace commands." Davos' eyes flicked to Daenerys, who inclined her head. "And if the queen agrees?" "I do," she said. "Take Ghost the horse and 2 of my Dothraki who have sailed before. They fear nothing but still no caution." "Then," she turned to Missandei. "Draft dispatches to White Harbor. Lord Wyman must spare 3 of his fastest cogs. Davos chooses crew." Maester Luwin noted feverishly. Bran added, "And send Mira Reed for guide. Crannogmen have lore of water paths round the Skags." Robb glanced at his brother. "You trust her?" "With my life," Bran said, simple as stone. Thus the Skagos expedition took shape. Davos, Mira, 3 cogs, a detachment of 20 unsullied, 2 Dothraki blood riders, and 1 of Bran's apprentices to witness runes. Catelyn protested at the cost in manpower, but Robb overruled gently. A sword in sheath is 1 fewer corpse later. He did not mention that he meant to ride south against Harrenhal with the majority of the host before the Krakens could entrench, nor that the iron price would be steep. That night, Robb walked the battlements with Daenerys. Snow drifted thick. Their footfalls made no sound. Fires flickered between crenellations, painting their faces amber. Below, the sounds of watchmen sharpening steel rang like distant bells. "I must strike Harrenhal," Robb said. "If Euron commands that ruin, he threatens every river crossing. We free the Trident, we free Grain, we choke the lions. And I must send a raven to Sunspear," she answered. "Prince Doran will not ally lightly, but if he learns we fight the dead as well as the throne, his sand snakes may ride. He lost sister and children to dragons once." Robb met her gaze. "He will fear you." "He should," she admitted quietly. "But fear can be tempered by purpose." He touched the parapet snow, scooping a handful, letting it melt in glove. "We part again then? You lead forces at the wall?" "Then I stay to oversee Dragonglass forging and Bran's council. Jorah, Grey Worm, and half my Unsullied go south with you. Drogon too." He favors action. Robb's brows rose. "You trust me with him?" "He trusts Grey Wind," she said, smiling. "And he trusts that I trust you." Silence grew comfortable again. Wind whipped snow from her hair. He brushed a flake from her cheek without thinking. She stilled beneath his fingers, eyes luminous. For a long breath, they simply shared the hush. Then a torch snapped below, startling them apart. She laughed. Soft. He shook his head ruefully. "Duty first." "Ride soon," she said, turning. "The sky sings of storms by fortnight end." He nodded, watching her descend the stair. Black cloak swallowed by swirling white. The empty space she left felt suddenly enormous. Davos' small flotilla slit free of White Harbor 3 days later, sails bellied with a crunching wind. Mira Reed stood near the prow, spear strapped across her back, eyes narrowed against Spindrift. She smelled tempest on the horizon but said nothing. Storms belonged to the sea as whites to the night. Her heart hammered with quiet thrill. She had not been so far from the neck before. Yet every bog lesson taught that the world's edge is only the next reed bank. The Unsullied lined the rails, expressions blank, yet she sensed tension. Water unsettled men raised on desert sand. She found herself humming a half-remembered children's rhyme about krakens, stealing anchors, and ghost seals, wearing human skin. Davos heard and cocked a brow. "Grimmer songs I've heard," he said, "but not many." "The grimmest songs keep you sharp," she replied. They warn of teeth in darkness. They reached Skagos' ragged coast 2 nights later, under a jagged half-moon. The island's mountain spines reared like breakers frozen mid-crash. Forests of twisted pine crouched between peaks, their lower branches adorned by tattered ribbons and bones, offerings perhaps to gods unknown. Davos anchored in a sheltered cove and put ashore with a scouting party at dawn. Snow dropped heavily, muting every sound. The beach stones were slick with black ice, resonating with faint hums when the wind skirled. It was Reed who found the cave mouth behind a toppled menhir carved with runes matching Bran's parchment. Inside, the passage sloped downward, echoing with the drip of unseen water. Unsullied torches revealed ancient murals of white wolves, with crystal eyes chasing serpents of fire. At last they entered a vault where a pedestal of green stone supported a horn longer than a war lance, spiraled and black as moonless sky. Its surface swirled continuously, as though shadow lived beneath. When Davos touched it, frost bloomed on his fingertips. He jerked back, swearing. Mira slid a hand-woven net beneath. "Lift gently," the singing spear these islanders once named it. They believed its call could make the glaciers walk. Davos shivered. "Let's hope it never sings." They lashed the horn within cedar crates insulated by wool. As they emerged into daylight, shaggy shapes appeared at the tree line. Skagosi tribals wearing patchwork hides, wielding obsidian-tipped spears and axes of whale bone. Their leader, a giant of a man with a single ivory horn helm, raised his weapon. Davos stepped forward unarmed, but the Unsullied parted shields. Tension knotted the air like bowstring. Mira spoke first, in softly lilting old tongue learned at her father's knee. The chieftain grunted. After a terse exchange, he lowered his axe. The Skagosi approached, wide nostrils flaring. He extended a hand and brushed the crate, then spat into snow and smeared his brow with it, a gesture of grave oath. Mira translated. They would allow removal if the takers promised never to return the horn to the island. Its dreams had poisoned their children. Davos swore by the maiden's tears, an old sailor's vow. The Skagosi melted back into pines as silently as they'd come. Davos exhaled long. That went smoother than Braavos harbor tariffs. They returned to the ships, but a malevolent wind greeted them. Black clouds seethed from north by northwest, snow biting sideways. Davos knew that sky. Reef. Anxiety churned his gut. They stowed the horn and prepared, but the gale struck before they could raise anchor. All day they battled monstrous swells. Topmasts creaked, lines froze. A rogue wave capsized the rearmost cog, spilling 2 Unsullied and 1 Dothraki into froth. They were pulled out white-faced, coughing ice. Night fell like ink. Mira found Davos at the wheel, beard stiff with rime. The hull groans. Then talk sweet to her, he shouted above the roar. She's a stubborn girl. But hours later, the starboard quarter submerged rock. Water spurted through the seam. Pumps labored. Davits creaked. Mira, Unsullied, and Dothraki formed bucket chains. Davos fought the rudder but realized they would not make White Harbor. Instead he angled southeast with the storm, praying to every god that the currents would spit them into the Bay of Seals, or even as far south as Gulltown. Any shore would do. On the third dawn, the storm abated. They limped toward the Riverland's coast, hull half-patched with sailcloth and tar-D. The horn remained intact. Lashings of silver chain crossed the crate now, tied by Unsullied, who refused to trust wood alone. Davos watched it uneasily. Sometimes he swore the horn hummed beneath the crate, matching the pitch of wind across the broken rail. In Winterfell, Robb and Daenerys awaited word beneath swirling snows. Ravens delayed. Bran muttered of ships swallowed by mist. Anxiety gnawed like rats. Still, Robb had no choice. Harrenhal's threat loomed. He marched 5,000 Northmen, 2,000 Unsullied, and 200 Dothraki south past the Twins, leaving Winterfell garrisoned by Manderley foot and Bolton archers. Though distrust for Roos's absent house tinged every command, Catelyn embraced him long near the east gate, tears freezing on his collar. "Bring my girls home," she whispered. He promised, though the wait felt impossible. Daenerys watched him depart from atop the battlements, wind whipping her braid. Rhaegal coiled behind her, chest thrumming. She lifted a hand as the column dwindled. He raised his helm in silent salute. Only when the last standard vanished did she turn to tasks. Forging, training, ravens to Dorne, negotiations with free folk envoys Steer Magnar, brought south by Tormund Giantsbane, seeking safe refuge beyond the wall. Robb's march felt like stepping into another song entirely. Drums beat Riverland's cadences. Unsullied spearwall gleamed under southern sun pale as tin. Scouts brought news of Greyjoy outriders pillaging outlying hamlets near Harrenhal, hauling prisoners for sacrifice to the drowned god. Worse, Lannister outriders wearing black sun brooches had been seen meeting Kraken envoys under nightskin banners, shreds of Tywin's brilliance weaving alliances from mutual hate. Robb convened war council beneath ancient elms near Maidenpool. Sir Brynden laid a map on moss. Euron holds the lake, ringed his scorpions along the shattered curtain wall. His mages, if rumors speak true, dance strange fires by night. He spat. "A dragon solves walls," Lord Glover said. "Let Drogon burn the keep." Robb shook his head. "If prisoners still live, we risk their lives. And we cannot show the realm war waged by indiscriminate flame." He looked to Grey Worm, who nodded in silent agreement. Nights grew bloodier as they closed in. Karstark outriders captured a raiding party of Ironborn. Harrion begged permission to flay them for news. Robb denied. Harrion's temper boiled. Late one moonless night, a sentry found the Ironborn corpses hung from trees. Skins peeled. Robb confronted Harrion. Denials turned to defiance. Grey Wind sensed tension and growled. Harrion's horse reared. Robb stripped him of command and dispatched him to guard the baggage train. The Karstark spoke poison behind closed flaps after, fueling dissent. The siege of Harrenhal commenced with dawn fog curling among drowned towers. Robb arrayed catapults of dragonglass pitch, less volatile than wildfire, but sticky and lethal to wights should Euron wield them. Arrows rained. Unsullied advance shields up, hacking through barricades of splintered oars. Dothraki screamed down a dry moat. Hooves pounding. Grey Wind leapt through arrow slits to hamstring reavers. Flames roared where Drogon strafed inner walls. Scorching Kraken banners to drifting ash. Within, Euron laughed atop the Widow's Tower. Cloak whipping. "Come, sweet King of Crows," he shouted. "Let us see if the dragon wolf fears the deep." He lifted a twisted horn bound in pale leather. At first Robb thought it a challenge. Then Drogon reeled midair, shriek sharp. The horn's sound slithered like snakes through marrow. Deeper even than Kraken's calls. Older. Drogon spit hot fire but wobbled. Robb ordered horns blown in answer. War horns shrieked, drums pounded. Unsullied volleys forced Euron back behind crenellations. Grey Worm signaled archers. They fired shafts, black-fletched with dragonglass. One struck the horn, cracking it. Euron cursed, vanished. Chaos ripped the courtyard. Ironborn berserkers surged. Wolves and Khalasars clashed. Robb saw Drogon slump onto a tower roof, wings mantled protectively. Fury ignited. He charged with Heart's Bane raised, carving a path toward the gate. Iron spears shattered on the blade, frost exploding like powdered glass. He felt the sword guide his hand, as though the weapon hunted of its own will. Inside, halls stank of rot. Reavers fled before him, but a monstrous figure confronted him. Stone-gray flesh tattooed with faded kraken spirals, eyes black pits, lips sewn shut. It swung a warhammer that split flagstones. Robb dodged, the starfire blade biting the figure's knee. The wound smoked and whined, but no blood spilled. The horror roared, sound like ice cracking, and swung again. Robb parried. Sparks like cold blue petals swirling. At last Heartsbane sheared the creature from shoulder to hip. Tidal stench burst free, choking. The monstrosity toppled, still twitching. Robb's men poured in behind him. Tower by tower they cleared. By dusk Harrenhal's courtyard lay under wolf banners. Euron had fled. Slipping out with a handful of priests via underground wharfs. Prisoners, riverfolk, some Northmen, even a few Reachlords, were freed, weeping thanks. Robb ordered soup lines erected, not gallows. That night torchlight warmed the blackened stones. Grey Wind dipped muzzle to the lake, drinking. Robb climbed the Kingspire Tower to find Drogon perched wounded but alive. He laid a hand to the scaled shoulder. The dragon's golden eye fixed on him. For a heartbeat, a pulse passed between them. Acknowledgement, respect, maybe even gratitude. He spoke softly, promising repairs would be swift. Feed plenty. Drogon huffed steam. Back in the Great Hall, Grey Worm reported casualties minimal. Unsullied discipline saved many. Yet the horn Euron had blown still lay shattered on blood-slick flagstones. Its fragments pulsed with dark heat. Robb wrapped them in chainmail and sent by swift rider to Daenerys, evidence and warning alike. At Winterfell, the message arrived 2 weeks later with the first heavy dump of full winter snow. Daenerys read the report, lips pressed thin. Bran reached to touch one shard. His pupils dilated. "Song of the Deep," he murmured. "Blood of Leviathan. It makes dragons weep." She withdrew the fragment. Karth once bartered dragon eggs with such songs. She told Missandei, voice low. Some mages believe certain horns can sever the bond between rider and mount. She thought of Drogon staggering. Her fists clenched. We must purge these artifacts. Missandei's eyes widened. Melt them with dragon fire? And bury the slag under the wall, Daenerys decided. No mortal hands shall shape them again. Word of Harrenhal's liberation lifted spirits across the north. But the joy dimmed when Devas's crippled cog limped into White Harbor bearing the great horn and news of unsullied loss to the storm. Wyman Manderley sent swift horse to Winterfell. When the crate was opened beneath the godswood, the horn's shadow seemed to swallow firelight. Even stoic Grey Worm shivered. Daenerys ordered a ditch dug east of Wintertown, filled with pitch and dragonglass shards, then lined it with the kindling of weirwood branches blessed by Bran. At moonrise he stood above it, horn braced on stone. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion landed around the pit. Snow churned to steam under their heat. She raised a hand. Dracarys. Flame roared. A trio of infernal streams meeting at the horn. It glowed dull red, then white, then split with an ululating scream felt rather than heard. Bran cried out, covering ears. The horn collapsed into molten rivulets that hissed into black glass lumps. Daenerys watched until the last ember dimmed. Missandei closed the pit with shovel and prayer. After, Daenerys knelt by Bran. Are you hurt? He shook head weakly. Just echoes. The horn weeps no longer. She smiled. Good. As year's end neared, the north prepared for a surge of darkness. Jon Snow returned with Tormund's freefolk host. 10,000 men, women, and giant kin seeking refuge inside the gift. Negotiations were tense. Old hatreds gnawed. But Daenerys parlayed personally, ensuring safe farmland tracts in exchange for oath to fight the dead. Tormund accepted with bawdy humor. Giants bowed heads to dragons in curious mixture of awe and mischief, one even snowballing gray wind, provoking raucous laughter that echoed through pines. Robb, still mending Drogon's wound with maester salves and his own careful watch, rode north again with the victory banners of Harrenhal. The riverlands cheered. Brazier lights flickered yellow along every ridge. In each liberated village, he proclaimed Daenerys the breaker of chains and deliverer of dawn. Some skeptical lords muttered, yet refugees who'd witnessed night's horrors spoke up. Seeds of a realm's new faith sprouted. As Robb neared Moat Cailin, the first deep blizzard collapsed roads. He camped at the ruins where his father once stood. Reflection heavy. Letters exchanged with Daenerys crackled with shared resolve, and something deeper budding between war reports. In King's Landing, Cersei's monstrous guard, Sir Robert Strong, finally awoke. He strode silent beside her, helm fused to skull. She felt invincible. Tywin scowled, uncertain of its soul, but accepted the asset. Rumors of the Dragonwolf Coalition's approach reached his ears. He convened a secret council with Qyburn Pycelle and a gaunt red priest of the Lord of Light smuggled from Lys. They plotted a trap, wildfire caches along the Blackwater once more, but this time laced with powders rumored to blind dragons. Qyburn boasted of scorpions fitted with chains forged in Ashai. Tywin demanded proofs. Yet the realm's tide shifted with winter's flow. At Sunspear, Arianne Martell unfurled a raven from Daenerys herself, sealed with wolf and dragon. The princess read by lantern in her sand-silk chamber, heart thumping. Fire against Lannister gold. The dream of vengeance flickered bright. She rode to her father and spoke with passion of the new dawn. Doran listened, lonely in his gout and grief, then nodded gravely. Dispatch the sand ship to White Harbor. We will treat, he said, voice trembling with possibilities. In the Vale, little Lord Robin Arryn watched a falcon soar above Lunary Crest and declared he wanted a dragon of his own. Pettier Baelish smiled thinly and penned new letters, scenting winds to ride. One still dusk, as Winterfell settled into bitter cold, Daenerys climbed the tallest tower alone. The sky above roiled with green auroras dancing like veils of ghost fire. She leaned against frozen stone, shivering though cloaked. Footsteps approached. She turned, heart skipping, to see Robb emerging from the stairwell, cloak snowy. He had ridden ahead of his host, gray wind trailing, to arrive earlier than ravens predicted. She exhaled steam, half laughter, half relief. "You came with the lights," she murmured. "I followed them," he said. "They pointed me home." They stood together watching veils ripple. Below, dragons dozed in the yard. Dire wolves nested close for warmth. The castle breathed as though alive, old stone heart beating. Robb glanced sideways. "We have months, perhaps weeks, before the others strike in full. Scouts report a host moving south beyond the Milkwater. Bran warns the long night's heart will break over Winterfell. Then now," Daenerys nodded, "then we make our stand here. Wolf and dragon, spear and starfire." He hesitated, then stepped closer, frost crunching. "With you," he added softly, "I have found something I never expected amid war. Peace and purpose. And in you, fire that warms, not burns." Her eyes filled unnoticed tears. "And in you, winter that shelters, not kills." He touched her cheek. She leaned into calloused palm. "When this is done, when dawn holds, then we'll write new songs," she said, lips brushing his knuckles. He bent, and under the ghost-green sky, they shared a kiss neither fire nor ice could quell. In that moment prophecy tangled with choice, and the realm's future gained a heartbeat. Far away, on the shivering sea's black horizon, an icy wind howled. White shadows stirred, and somewhere beneath cracked glaciers, eyes like blue suns opened, fixed on the south, where wolves and dragons slept intertwined, dreaming of morning. A.K. Ice cracked in the farthest reaches of night as though a hidden continent were shrugging awake, the sound rolling south beneath glaciers and across tundra. In every village along the Gift, dogs lifted muzzles, hackles stiff, and keened in frightened answer. The call reached Winterfell on a moonless hour past the wolf's share of night, a distant groan so deep it seemed the earth itself turning its bones. Garrison sentries stilled, ears straining. The dragons stirred within their timbered roosts. Rhaegal hissed, smoke curling through his fangs. Daenerys Targaryen woke at once, heart hammering, the imprint of a dream already fading. A white tide devouring fields, a sword of starlight shattering in her hand. She sat upright in furs beside Robb Stark, whose breath fogged the freezing air. His eyes snapped open, reading the fear that flickered across her face. Neither spoke. Their room, the old Lord Solar, held its breath. Even the fire in the hearth seemed cowed, flames shrinking as though some great frost had leaned upon the stones from outside. A loud knock came, and Jon Snow entered without waiting. "Raven from the wall," he said, thrusting a parchment sealed with black wax. "The dead are through the woods near the Shadow Tower. 10,000 by Mormont's count, giants among them. They march for this castle." "Denishanti." Robb swung his legs to the floor, muscles tensing beneath scars earned at Harrenhal. "How many days?" "Less," Jon answered. "Rangers report the host moves in silence, faster than living armies. Bran's ravens saw them on the King's Road north of the Gift yesterday. Snowstorms cloak them, but they do not slow." Daenerys felt the room sway, as though all strategy, all alliances spun about a new fixed point. The time left before Winterfell drowned under ice. "Send word to Moat Cailin," she said. "Recall every company there. Harrenhal's prisoners still rest, but we need their arms." "Already done," Jon told her. "But ravens can't outrun the storm this forward drags behind." Robb rose, tugging on his breeches. "Then we ready the walls, the crypts, the godswood. Wake Bran, muster the forge lines. Heartsbane will drink again, and I want every dragon glass shaft tipped and ready by dusk." Jon hesitated. "And the horn?" Daenerys answered. "Winter's breath stays bound beneath the second gatehouse. Bran swears its call is final doom or final dawn. We hold it as last resort." "Then Jon bowed. the candlelight scoring tired hollows beneath his eyes. He departed to rouse the castle, gray cloak flaring behind. Robb turned to Daenerys. "You dreamt again?" "Only shards," she whispered, drawing the quilt around her shoulders. The cold pressed like a blade between her ribs. "But I felt them, a hunger, ancient as the first night." He cupped her face. "We fight them, you and I. We end it." She nodded, but the fear did not lift entirely. Some omens cling like frost on glass until sunlight breaks. Winterfell awoke to the clang of the smithy long before dawn. Sparks flurried like meteors, while men hammered obsidian into arrowheads. In the yard, unsullied, drilled in perfect squares, shields edge to edge. Free folk archers strung bows of yew and weirwood. Giants tested enormous clubs wrapped in iron bands. Northern Garons were led to the ramparts. Great wicker baskets lashed to their sides loaded with javelins tipped in dragonglass. From the battlements Bran Stark watched, Summer's shaggy head resting upon the arm of his chair. Bran's sight ranged beyond the walls, slipping the leash of his body, soaring with ravens over forests fissuring under cold. When he returned to himself, frost rimed his lashes. "Night King rides at the head," he announced to Maester Luwin. A new crown of antlered ice upon his skull. Fire alone no longer daunts him. "How many?" Luwin dared. "Enough to front the castle on every compass point," Bran answered. "And more follow." Missandei scrawled copies of his words for every captain. Beneath the watchful eyes of Grey Worm and Mage Mormont, runners spirited the messages to towers, granaries, and the crypt tunnels, now stockpiled with pitch-filled casks. At midday, the last of Robb's field host from Moat Cailin thundered through the open gate, horses blown, men hollow-eyed. Davos Seaworth rode at their head, though seasick on land, the Horn Winter's breath secured in a steel-braced chest tied behind him. Jon greeted him grim. The storm had snapped 2 masts off Davos' returning cog. But the old smuggler would not die until the seas truly swallowed him. On the rampart Daenerys stood wrapped in a cloak of black bear fur, hair braided tight against the wind. The dragons clustered nearby, restless. She could feel their disquiet like a drum thrumming through her bones. Rhaegal paced back and forth upon the wall-walk, claws sending chips of stone pinwheeling to the yards below. Viserion huffed impatient bursts of flame that turned snowflakes to steam. Drogon, perched upon the highest tower, stared north with an intensity that made lesser men shudder. Robb joined her. Together they studied a thin smear of darkness across the horizon. "Scouts returning," he said. Jon appeared moments later, wind-burned, pointing. "They're not ours." The smear resolved into riders. 5, then 15, cloaks snapping indigo and silver trim. As they neared the walls, Winterfell's watchers cried out. Dorne's snakeship Envoy, banners of copper sun and spear unfurled. At their vanguard rode Arianne Martell in sand-colored mail, hair braided with amethyst beads. Behind her came the Prince of Dorne himself, in a wheeled palanquin, drawn by a white gelding. Nestled among cushions, his gout-swollen feet rested, but his eyes blazed. The Southern Company halted before the gate. Missandei hailed them in High Valyrian, and at a nod from Daenerys the drawbridge descended. Inside the great hall fires roared, but the newcomers shivered beneath northern chill. Doran Martell inclined his head to Robb, then to Daenerys. "Princess Elia cries for rest," he said. "Her son cries for vengeance. Dorne comes for both. Our fleet docks at White Harbor behind us. 4,000 spears, and 10 scorpion ballistae, each iron-tipped and obsidian by our glass rights." Robb clasped forearm to forearm. "Your boat runs on desert dreams, my lord. This war offers only ice." "Damn?" Doran smiled thinly. "There is fire enough between you two to thaw centuries' winter." A council followed, fast, furious, lines of defense drawn. Doran offered the scorpions to line the towers. Tormund Giantsbane pledged giants to guard the outer ditch. The free folks' bone trumpets would sound alarms along the east wall, where the forest pressed closest. The Dornish would man the God's Eye bastion, famed archers laying down black glass storms. Unsullied would hold the gate courtyard as last bulwark. As the council broke, Bran's rasping voice cut through the clatter. He comes at moonrise tomorrow. The sky will speak first. Rings of silent lightning. When they appear, make ready. Silence fell heavy. Then Robb answered with equal quiet. So be it. That night Daenerys sat with Tyrion Lannister in the library's half-ruined loft. He had arrived days earlier under white flag, escorting 50 seasoned engineers who claimed to know the flaws in his father's scorpion designs. Rune-etched spectacles perched upon his nose. He read figures by lamplight. Sparks snapped in the brazier. Outside, wolves howled at a crescent moon. "You are quiet, my queen," he murmured. "Dreams press." She admitted, "I see a sword of smoke that breaks and reforms." A riddle. He sipped wine, thoughtful. Dreams are letters from a half-literate god. One must guess half the consonants. She smiled, faint. "And what message whispers now?" He gestured to stacks of parchment. "That we have 93 scorpion bolts left when we need thrice that number. That your dragons will be shot at by blinded men in panic. That fear makes poor aim." Mentioned. "I will ride Drogon," she said. "Fear can take aim at me instead." He looked up, candle worrying shadows across the scars on his cheek. "Bravery is not lack of fear. It is reason's victory over fear. If you die, the realm's only anvil against darkness cracks in two. I cannot lead from behind a wall," she answered. "I was born in a storm. My blood calls to sky and flame." "And to a wolf," Tyrion noted gently. Daenerys lowered her eyes, a soft heat coloring her cheeks, even in frost. "If I fall, you must guide them. Then I shall speak the best lies I've ever told, that they might live long enough to become truths." They parted with a clasp of hands. Tyrion remained hunched over siege tables, quills scratching. Daenerys climbed the spiral stair to the rookery where Bran visited with owls. Robb waited there, leaning against stone. Below, the godswood glimmered under starlight, each branch silvered. She approached. He captured her hand. No words needed. In the hush, the weight of coming night pressed like a mountain. Before dawn, the sky erupted in rings of silent white lightning. Exactly as Bran foretold. Chainmail jangled. Horns sounded. Winterfell's courtyards churned with controlled frenzy. Archers scrambled to parapets. Unsullied lifted shields in seamless waves. Dornish scorpions ratcheted back. Black bolts knocked. Above all, the dragons rose. 3 shadows unfurling against the flickering heavens, wings booming like drums of gods. Daenerys mounted Drogon at the king's stair. Robb stood below, clasping her knee. "Fly high," he murmured. "Stand tall," she answered. Gray wind howled, ice crystals scattering from his ruff. Rhaegal, ridden by Jon Snow, after sleepless moonlit training, shot upward, emerald fire streaming. Viserion followed with a Dothraki rider strapped behind his neck, whooping skyward. The rings of lightning widened, then snapped into a dome of silent pale fire. From the tree line emerged the first phalanx of whites, moving with eerie synchronization. Shields of frozen hide, swords etched in rhyme. Behind them came giants glazed in crystal armor, clubs studded with gravestones. And at their center on skeletal stallion rode the Night King, eyes blazing cerulean, spear of pure starfrost in hand. The battle began with soundless terror. No roar, no drum. Only the soft hiss of snow under marching feet. Northern archers loosed first. Clouds of obsidian-tipped arrows sighed forth, each shaft vanishing into undead ranks with brittle cracks. Bodies fell, shattering, but still they came. Giants hurled boulders. Scorpions barked, their massive bolts streaking black. A direct hit pierced the giant's chest. Ice exploded, the creature collapsing in shards. Then, the sky answered. An icy wind keened across ramparts as a second wave appeared. Shrieking whites riding undead wyverns, rib bones strung with sinew wings. They dived, claws raking battlements. One swooped upon a scorpion nest. Dornish engineers scattered as teeth like icicles snapped. Grey Worm hurled a dragon-glass javelin, clean through its skull. The beast burst into shards mid-air. Dragons countered, Drogon plummeted, flame blasting a corridor among ground forces. Rhaegal spun through wyverns, claws severing wings, green fire spiraling. Viserion strafed giants, his silver-white flame melting crystal armor. Mage Mormont's heavy infantry charged through steaming gaps to hack the remnants. Still, the dead pressed. The Night King raised one long arm. Sudden spikes of ice erupted from the earth, skewering Manderley pikemen. He advanced, horses' hooves freezing blood pools into glass. Heartsbane's hum reached Robb where he fought atop the gatehouse. He bounded down the stairs, Grey Wind beside him, and leapt into the fray. Wherever the Starfire blade fell, whites disintegrated in blue sparks. Grey Wind tore through undead wolves, stitched from bone and sinew. But time favored the dead. Obsidian stores dwindled. Men braved overrun corpses to retrieve spent arrows, only to watch them crumble to ash. The Night King strode ever closer, his chill aura frosting shields before they struck him. Jon spurred Rhaegal downward, determined to meet him in aerial duel. But a spear of ice whistled upward, grazing Rhaegal's flank. Green scales cracked. Jon hauled the dragon skyward, bleeding heat dropping like falling stars. On the eastern wall, a section collapsed under relentless pounding of frost mammoths. Free folk scattered. A breach gaped. Giants stepped forward to seal it, clubs meeting tusks with thunderous booms. One giant named Wun Moruk grappled a mammoth, dragging it into the moat filled with pitch. Archers loosed flaming arrows and the trench ignited, engulfing them both in roaring inferno. The dead screamed, a choir of breaking glass. Through smoke Daenerys saw the Night King raise his spear again, aiming, not for dragons, but for Robb. She screamed, spurring Drogon in a vertical dive. Fire burst in a spear-thick cone, intercepting the streaking missile inches from Robb's helm. The spear shattered in mid-arc, shards raining. The Night King looked up, eyes locking on Daenerys. In that moment time froze. She saw herself mirrored in those unholy blue depths, tiny, defiant mote of heat. He extended both hands. Snow roared upward, shaping into a spiral of jagged ice shards swirling like swarm of knives. Drogon banked. Daenerys felt stones of Winterfell's courtyard race beneath. She threaded flame between the shards, but one struck Drogon's wing membrane. Blood hissed where it met. Drogon faltered. She clenched thighs, urging him higher. Ra beneath rallied the unsullied phalanx, dragging back formations to cover the queen's retreat. Heartsbane flickered star-white, devouring whites. Yet for every 5 killed, 10 more spilled through the breach. Dornish arrows were gone. Men flung rocks. The dead began to climb ramparts, fingers like bone claws anchoring in mortar. In the Godswood, Bran's voice echoed wordless across red leaves. Maester Luwin stood beside the weirwood, the Horn Winter's breath unchained. "He says now," Luwin croaked, terrified. Catelyn stood near, trembling. "Are we certain?" Tyrion arrived breathless. "There is no certainty, only the decision before certainties vanish." Bran's eyes glowed. "Night King's heart is bound to the Song of Winter. Break the song, break the heart." Daenerys landed in the yard, helping wounded, unsullied form lines. Robb shouted across chaos, "The horn?" Her gaze darted to the Godswood. She shook her head once. "Not yet." Another wyvern dive. Viserion intercepted. Mid-air collision sent both crumpling into the parapet. Flames and ice exploded. Debris rained. The wyvern's corpse shattered. Viserion tumbled onto the bailey, wing twisted. Tormund's freefolk rushed to form shield wall around the fallen dragon. Snow thickened. Vision blurred. The moon vanished. Only torch pits along walls kept pockets of orange alive. The air dropped so cold men's tears froze before falling. Breath formed fog statues. In that suffocating hush, the Night King advanced to the outer gate, frost flickering in his footprints. His lieutenants, thin, spidery things of blue steel and hairless bone, drifted at his flanks. Jon dropped from Rhaegal into the courtyard, sword longclaw, blazing dragonglass white. Darren, Darren. He met Rob at the shattered doors. I'll take him, John said. I was raised for this. And I was crowned for this, Rob countered. We go together. Daenerys strode through smoke to their side. Not without me. Gray wind and ghost flanked, fur bristling. Drogon circled overhead, wing beat, stirring blizzards into spiraling vortices. Bran's face gleamed atop the battlement like a ghost lamp within the weirwood's crimson leaves. From his lips came one word, amplified by the old gods. Now. Catelyn raised the horn to her mouth. Her hands shook violently. Davos steadied them. She drew a breath and blew. The sound was not a note, but an absence, a ripping hole in the fabric of hearing. All noise ceased. The clash of steel, the hiss of frost, even the thunder of dragons, silenced into an unbearable void. The horn's cry reached into marrow, stripped thought. Torches guttered, flame bending inward as if sucked by unseen tide. Breath froze in lungs. The Night King halted, head cocking. His lieutenants quivered, forms blurring. In the sky, rings of white lightning shattered into jagged spears that flickered out like snuffed candles. Then a second tone emerged, the answering roar of dragon hearts. Drogon screamed. Rhaegal, wounded but aloft, echoed. Viserion rumbled defiantly. From their chests burst a resonance of deep fire. Not flame, but sound, a counter-song of creation answering winter's negation. Heartsbane shone bright as daylight, its blade bursting in prismatic fire. The Stark and the Dragon Queen stood side by side. The sword in Rob's hand, conjuring heat that rolled outward in an invisible wave. Snowflakes turned to mist midair. Ice on walls sublimed into wafts of steam. Cracks spiderwebbed the Night King's armor. He raised his remaining spear, but its point melted to water. His blue eyes flared, and for the first time terror flickered within. Jon lunged. Longclaw met the starfire blade tipped to hilt, crossing over the Night King's heart. Rob drove forward, Jon levered upward. Steel of fire and steel of dragonglass shearing into crystal ribs. The Night King screamed, a sound like glaciers calving. Blue flame geysered from the wound. His body shattered into a million shards of glittering frost, drifting like snow ash into the wind. Instantly the whites convulsed. Chains of ice that bound them shattered. They collapsed, limbs disintegrating. Giants crashed like toppled towers of rime. Wyverns dissolved mid-swoop. The storm overhead fractured into starlight, and the first true wind in hours swept clear across the field, scattering remains as harmless snow. For a long heartbeat no one moved. Silence reverberated in hollow chests after the horn's void. Then an immense cheer rose. Free folk. Unsullied, Dornish, Northmen, maids, smiths, children. A roar that shook ramparts more than any siege engine. Daenerys swayed. Rob caught her. She sagged into his arms, tears hot upon her cheeks as life-saving warmth returned to the air. Drogon landed behind them, wings enfolding both like a black cloak. In his golden eyes burned triumphant relief. Jon pressed a fist to his chest, breathing ragged. Ghost licked his gauntlet. Bran slumped in his throne. Mira hurried to steady him. The song is broken, he murmured. Dawn rises. Above, the first crimson threads of sunrise stitched the torn heavens. Winterfell's broken walls smoked for days as funeral pyres burned the fallen. Black banners lined the yard for those lost. Giants laid alongside knights, spearwives next to Dornish archers, unsullied shoulder to shoulder with Karstark convicts redeemed in final stand. Snow kept falling, a gentler kind that drifted rather than slashed. Children laughed, chasing snowflakes while dragons basked in feeble sun rays, thin steam rising from their scales. In the great hall, Catelyn and Doran Martell oversaw healing kitchens. Bread baked with Dornish peppers warmed frost-numbed tongues. Tyrion organized ration ledgers, pinching quills and coin in equal measure. Davos supervised shiploads of southern grain escorted into White Harbor, now that rivers thawed by dragonfire. One evening, days after battle, the survivors gathered in the Godswood. The weirwood's face, red sap glistening, seemed to smile. Under its bowed boughs, Bran spoke of what he had seen. 1,000,000 spirits freed. Ice returned to silence. Old magic sung to rest. He looked older than his 14 years, yet ageless too. Jon approached him after ceremony. "I saw you guiding the ravens," he said. "You saved us." Bran shook his head. "We saved ourselves. People chose. Giants chose. Dragons chose. Wolves chose. The choice is the song." Jon hugged his brother, careful of frail shoulders. Spring came early that year, a tentative green creeping across snows. Word of Winterfell's miracle spread like dawn over darkened minds. At River Run, Edmure kneeled beside the tomb of his father and cried thanks. At Highgarden, Lady Olenna chuckled into her tea, whispering that Winter died to a bastard king and a foreign girl. How fitting. In Old Town, the bells rang for 3 straight hours. King's Landing writhed with rumor. Tywin Lannister listened stoically as reports confirmed the Night King's death. Qyburn proposed redirecting wildfire to hold the city, but the Hand scoffed. The realm will not abide needless fire after seeing true evil quenched. He dispatched envoys to Winterfell under White Banner, offering terms of truce. Cersei seethed, but even she sensed the tide turned. Stannis Baratheon's fleet anchored off White Harbor 3 weeks later, banners limp in still air. He climbed the sea stairs wearing only plain mail, crown left behind. Before assembled lords he bent knee to Robb and Daenerys both. "The realm lives. Law must live. Join my claim to yours. The Iron Throne becomes moot in dawn's light. Let us forge Council of Kings." Doran Martell lent cautious approval. The Reach and Vale signaled interest. A new order beckoned, plural, pragmatic, perhaps fragile but breathing. Within Winterfell's Solar Robb and Daenerys met one last time before ravens carried charters south. Candlelight painted her features gold. He set Heartsbane upon the table. She laid her hand atop his. "The blade is yours," he said. "It belongs to Fireborn blood." "It belongs to both," she answered. "A house of ice and fire." She drew a single line upon parchment, a seal yet unwritten. 3-headed dragon entwined with direwolf, beneath words in Common and Valyrian. "We guard the dawn. If the realm wishes symbol, give them truth," she said. He smiled. "And if they wish songs." She lifted on tiptoe, kissed him softly. "Then let minstrels work for their supper." Outside, crocuses nosed through thawing ground. Ravens nested in towers newly repaired. Giants planted young weirwoods along rebuilt walls. Children of free folk and Northmen played tag beneath dragon shadows. No horns of doom sounded, only smiths forging plowshares from shattered swords. And far away, atop a hill of graven stones south of King's Landing, Tyrion Lannister watched the horizon bloom peach with sunrise. He raised a wineskin in salute to absent siblings and all the broken myths. "Here now begins the happy ending," he mused, then corrected himself with a crooked grin. "Or the next hard beginning, which is the only ending mortals ever earn." In Winterfell's bed of sleeping roots, Bran dreamed. Of oceans glittering. Of a city rebuilt of white towers, where direwolves lounged upon marble and dragons, nested in warm spires. He saw children learning runes of old tongues, and new armies disbanded to plant orchards, and a king and queen who walked garden paths without guards. He felt the weirwood's slow pulse, older than empires whisper. Songs turn, leaves fall, but roots remember. And he understood. A story had not ended, it had merely turned a page. Above the north, dawn spilled full gold. Dragons stretched their wings in the warming light, testing thermals that smelled not of smoke or blood, but of snow-melt and pine, and the possibility of peace. Gray wind bounded after their shadows, tongue lolling. Robb and Daenerys stood upon the battlements watching life unfurl, hands clasped, hearts lighter than when last they stood here. "Shall we fly?" she asked. "Where?" "Anywhere," she laughed. "Everywhere." Drogon lowered his massive head to the platform. They climbed, settling between obsidian ridges. With a mighty whip of wings, the dragon leapt skyward. Rhaegal and Viserion quick behind. Snow spray glittered beneath like scattered diamonds. Winterfell's towers fell away. The cold air tasted suddenly of apple blossom and promise. They soared over forests gilded with first buds, rivers cracking their icy lids. Herds of elk lifting heads. Villagers looked skyward and waved. Some knelt. Others simply stared in wonder as living myths painted arcs across the firmament. Robb shouted over the wind, "The world looks kinder from above." "Because we fought to lift it," Daenerys called back. Drogon tilted his wings, and the three dragons banked south, toward the dawn-bright horizon where kingdoms waited for their new guardians. Wolves howled farewell. Giants raised tree-trunk arms. Bells rang from river towns. Hope flew with them, warm, fragile, immense, a thing newly born, yet older than fear. As long as they held it between them, ice and fire, heart and flame, night could never fully claim the world again.